One morning in September 2019, police arrived at a quiet home in Pennsylvania to check on someone who had not been responding to calls. From the outside, everything seemed normal. Both the windows were closed and the curtains were drawn, but no one answered the door. When the officers entered the house, they were unsettled by what they found: blood on the floors, towels soaked with stains, and obvious signs of violence. As they moved upstairs, they were confronted with a scene much worse than they had anticipated. Margaret Sumney was born on June 28, 1952, in Pittsburgh. She grew up in her family's dance studio, a lively center of creativity that was beloved by the community. The studio was more than just a place of work, it was like a second home to her. Eventually, Margaret became a ballet instructor, helping to manage the studio and organizing beloved Christmas performances that turned into a local tradition. Her warmth and enthusiasm left a significant impact on everyone she encountered. With a magnetic personality, she always appeared polished, composed. Despite life's challenges, Margaret remained resilient and purposeful. In her early adulthood, Margaret married. Unfortunately, their relationship quickly fell apart due to his emotional unavailability and irresponsibility. After their divorce, Margaret became a single mother to 2 daughters. With no help from their father, she took on all the responsibilities of parenting while also working at the studio. Despite these challenges, she provided a loving and structured home for her daughters. Years later, Margaret met another man, a charming dentist and Harvard graduate. His charisma and apparent commitment gave Margaret the stability she had been seeking. They married in 1986, created a life filled with financial security and comfort in a well-furnished home in Pennsylvania. In 1989, they welcomed a son, David Sumney. Her husband actively participated in raising David, and he also developed a strong bond with Margaret's daughters. Although their blended family seemed to thrive on the outside, the reality inside the home was different. David was raised without boundaries. From a young age, all his wishes were immediately fulfilled, whether it was toys, vacations, or treats. As he grew older, he started demanding them, learning how to manipulate others to get what he wanted. Even simple tasks became negotiable, and he refused to do them without a reward. He had no understanding of gratitude or responsibility. His only concern was his own benefit. One particularly alarming incident occurred when he found a bird in the backyard and squeezed it to death. Margaret was horrified by his complete lack of remorse, nervously joked with family members about him potentially becoming a criminal. However, her humor masked her genuine concern. David showed no empathy or guilt. Without intervention, these troubling traits only became more pronounced as he grew older. By 2001, Margaret's marriage had quietly ended in divorce, which, while amicable, brought an end to the stability Margaret had worked so hard to achieve. Financially, the family fell apart. Her husband stopped providing support, and the dance studio that had once been central to their lives was no longer viable, forcing Margaret to close it down. With limited resources, she took a job at a clothing store to meet basic needs, a humble but necessary step. Meanwhile, David's sense of entitlement grew. Despite the family's financial struggles, he continued to expect special treatment and exhibited unchanged behavior. Even while dealing with his own financial issues, his father financially supported him at a significant personal cost, justifying it as a way to maintain their fragile bond and often giving in to his son's demands. Although Margaret and her husband no longer lived together, they remained emotionally connected, trapped in a cycle of responding to David's volatile moods. He moved easily between both homes, exploiting their desire for harmony and love. Over the years, David's influence over his parents intensified. Despite their declining finances, increasing instability, neither parent adjusted their approach. The family dynamic had shifted completely, with their lives revolving around managing their son's feelings and minimizing his outbursts. In 2008, at 19 years old, David began studying mathematics at George Washington University. His parents, who had faced many hardships, were hopeful that higher education and a structured setting would improve his behavior. Despite the high costs of housing, tuition, and living expenses, his parents supported him financially. In 2010, Margaret visited Washington, D.C. to see her son. During this visit, she called her daughter, Ellen, from a hospital, claiming that David had attempted to harm himself with a knife and that she had injured her head in the process. However, Margaret's account was inconsistent. She was evasive, defensive about the details. When Ellen arrived, she found her mother and brother in different hospital rooms, which was unusual and unexplained. The medical staff were not forthcoming with information. Ellen started to worry that David's violent behavior had escalated, possibly directed at their mother. Despite her concerns, no investigation was initiated, and the incident went unexamined. Soon after, David was expelled from the university due to ongoing absenteeism and repeated rule violations. This news devastated his parents, as all their emotional, financial, and psychological efforts had ended in another failure. David returned to Pennsylvania, shuttling between his parents' homes without showing any signs of improvement. In July 2015, 26-year-old David hit a new low in his life. He was unemployed, lacked motivation, and depended entirely on his parents. When he asked his father for a substantial amount of money for a vacation and was turned down, things escalated violently. David physically assaulted his father, viciously beating him in their home. Neighbors, disturbed by the noise, called the police. Upon arrival, the officers found David on top of his father, hitting him. His father suffered severe injuries, including brain hemorrhaging, spinal damage, and significant internal injuries. As a result, he was left unable to walk or care for himself and had to be moved to a long-term nursing facility. David was arrested at the scene and charged with aggravated assault. He was released shortly after posting bail. The father he nearly killed could no longer communicate for himself. Despite the violent attack, David faced minimal consequences. With little legal opposition and a family too shattered to resist, he walked away free, unchanged, unrepentant, more emboldened than ever. Afterward, he began telling people that he had joined the U.S. Navy. Although this story seemed odd, Margaret held on to it. For her, the idea of military service represented hope, a structured, disciplined path that could save her son from his troubled state. However, there was no evidence of any enlistment. He didn't provide any documents, wear a uniform, or answer questions about his claimed service. Every time someone asked, his responses were vague and unverifiable. At the same time, David was undergoing a physical transformation. He became obsessed with strength training, quickly gaining a lot of muscle. Now nearly 6.5 feet tall and heavily built, he appeared as intimidating as his behavior had become. As his physical strength increased, his aggression followed suit. David grew more unpredictable, volatile. Conversations with him were filled with hostility, subtle threats, and direct attempts to control those around him. He made it clear that any pushback would be met with force. Margaret, exhausted from years of fear, confusion, and love. She stayed by his side, still hoping for the return of the son she once knew. But by then, control was lost for her and the rest of the family. David was no longer just difficult or spoiled, he had become dangerous. No one seemed able or willing to stop him. In November 2016, another terrifying incident occurred at Margaret's home. Late one night, David, who was very drunk, entered her bedroom and began to strangle her while she slept. The attack was sudden and violent. Due to his large size and strength, Margaret struggled to fight back. However, she managed to break free and scream for help. David left the room without saying anything, returned to his own. Margaret then called the police. When they arrived, they found David asleep, smelling strongly of alcohol. Margaret had visible bruises, finger marks on her neck and ribs. She recounted the attack to the officers, mentioning that David had referred to a Navy SEAL reference. David was arrested, and the situation was classified as domestic violence with aggravating factors. However, Margaret intervened again. Concerned that a felony charge would jeopardize her son's future, she urged the prosecutors to lessen the charges. She argued that he was under the influence and needed rehabilitation instead of imprisonment. She also pushed the idea, though unverified, that David had served in the U.S. Navy, presenting it as a sign of his potential. Her plea was convincing enough for the court to reduce the felony charge to a lesser offense, allowing David to avoid severe punishment. During court proceedings, an official background check revealed a shocking truth: David had never served in any branch of the military. The story he had told for years was entirely false. There was no record of him being recruited, enlisted, or trained. His military persona was a deliberate lie, used to hide his failures and violent tendencies. Despite this, Margaret still believed her son could change. David received a 16-month sentence, marking his first genuine consequence. While in prison, he portrayed himself as someone struggling with addiction, rather than his aggressive behavior. He claimed that alcohol was the source of his problems, not a lack of empathy or violent impulses. This approach worked for him. A social worker supported his transfer to a rehabilitation facility instead of prison, and the court granted it. At the Pennsylvania Recovery Center, David was put under structured supervision. He participated in therapy sessions and group activities. Margaret visited regularly, bringing supplies and defending her son. She saw the rehabilitation as a potential turning point. She hoped that if he completed the program, the worst would be behind him. After finishing treatment, David moved into transitional housing, quickly got a job. Progress reports indicated that he followed the rules and showed signs of adjustment. To his hopeful family, he appeared reformed. However, this appearance was only skin deep. Beneath the good behavior was the same manipulative person. David never truly accepted responsibility for his past, never showed genuine remorse, and never acknowledged the pain he caused. By 2018, David Summey's carefully crafted image was beginning to fall apart, though not fast enough for anyone to notice. In August, his father passed away at the age of 74 in a Pennsylvania nursing home. The official cause of death was listed as age-related health issues. However, those who knew the family understood that the real reason stemmed from a severe beating he suffered in 2015 at the hands of his son. This violent act resulted in the loss of his independence, ability to work, and dignity. His health steadily declined, could not be reversed. While the family never discussed it openly, there was a shared understanding that David's attack had dramatically altered his father's identity. Throughout this time, David faced no new charges and felt no remorse. At the funeral, Margaret remained composed and did not speak out against her son, which created tension among family members. They were baffled as to why she would continue to protect someone who had caused such pain. For them, it was not just a personal tragedy, but also a systemic failure. They believed law enforcement acted too late, the courts were too lenient, and Margaret's instinct to protect may have allowed a dangerous individual to continue endangering others. In 2019, David started a new relationship using a dating app. The woman moved in with him shortly after they met. At first, he seemed to have changed for the better. He was charming, respectful, and attentive. However, this behavior didn't last long. He soon became controlling and aggressive, closely monitoring her actions, imposing strict rules in their home. She noticed something troubling. David was writing checks in the name of his mother, Margaret. He claimed that Margaret had mental health issues and that he was handling her finances, even going so far as to forge her signature when necessary. However, there was no legal documentation, such as a power of attorney or a court order, to back up his claims. When his girlfriend voiced her concerns, he dismissed them, saying there were delays with the paperwork. Although she suspected he was committing fraud, she did not have enough evidence to report him to the authorities. As their relationship deteriorated and she prepared to leave, David reacted with anger. Fearing rejection, he insisted she meet him at a hotel in Atlantic City. Once there, he became abusive. Over several days, he physically attacked her, strangled her until she lost consciousness, and kept her captive without any means to get help. At one point, believing he had killed her, he abandoned the room. She lay injured and unresponsive until a concerned housekeeper, troubled by the prolonged "Do Not Disturb" sign, entered the room. The housekeeper discovered that she was alive, but in critical condition. She was taken to the hospital, and the police began an investigation. On July 16, 2019, an arrest warrant for David was issued, but due to a crucial mistake, the warrant wasn't entered into the federal database. This oversight allowed David to return to Pennsylvania without being identified as a fugitive. Days later, he was arrested on unrelated charges but was released because the warrant was not in the system. The protective measures designed to help the woman. The failure to communicate between agencies led to tragic outcomes. On September 1, 2019, one of Margaret's sisters tried to contact her several times, but her calls went unanswered. Worried, she contacted Margaret's eldest daughter, Ellen, who was also unable to reach her mother. By the morning of September 2, Ellen's anxiety grew as she continued trying to contact Margaret. Eventually, David answered the phone and stated that Margaret was asleep, refusing to let her speak to anyone. His tone was emotionless, which worried her. Ellen decided to contact local authorities to request a welfare check. When the police arrived at Margaret's home, everything seemed quiet. The windows were shut, and no one answered the door. After a few minutes, the officers forced their way inside and immediately sensed that something was amiss. A foul odor filled the air, blood stains were visible in several rooms, and there were drag marks suggesting an attempt to clean up or conceal something. Upstairs, they found Margaret in the bathtub. She had been dead for over 24 hours. She suffered broken ribs, a broken spine, cuts to her face and bruising all over her body. An autopsy report concluded that Margaret Summy died from blunt force trauma and her death was declared a homicide. Blood was on the walls and floors. In the hallway, investigators discovered a sickle with what appeared to be blood on it. The revolver that belonged to Margaret was missing, leaving only its empty ammunition box behind. Forensic experts carefully analyzed the scene. The amount of blood, attempts to clean up, and the arrangement of items suggested that this was not just a violent incident, but also a well-planned one. This was not an impulsive act, it was intentional and methodical. When questioned by police, David Summy denied any involvement in his mother's death. Instead, he said it was likely an accident or a drug overdose. When detectives described Ms. Summy's injuries, David Summy suggested that his mother had been dating a man and that he should be investigated. However, when police downloaded the contents of Summy's cell phone, they found hundreds of pictures of his mother being beaten to death. Assistant District Attorney Michael Pradines said the first photo was taken at 4:50 a.m. on August 30th. Interspersed among many of the victims' photos are selfies of the defendant, in which the defendant is seen with his face covered in blood, and in one photo he is seen giving a thumbs up, the prosecutor said. Pradines said investigators also found a video on his phone recorded at 2:41 a.m. on September 1, 2019, of David Summy washing his mother's body in the bathtub. In addition to the photos, his browsing history provided incriminating information. He had searched for ways to clean blood from surfaces, how human bodies decompose, and strategies to avoid detection in homes. David conducted searches on his phone at 11:11 a.m. on August 30, 2019, including the phrase, "How long does it take before a body starts to decompose?" He had also looked up chemical odor neutralizers and information on mummification. Rather than panicking, David had planned ahead. The brutality of the crime and the calculated nature of his actions painted a psychological picture of someone without a conscience, remorse, or restraint. Investigators were certain of his guilt, but their challenge was to apprehend him. Police reached out to Ellen, the only person still occasionally in touch with David, asked for her assistance in setting a trap. She agreed. When he showed up, officers arrested him immediately. They found Margaret's checks and pieces of her jewelry among his belongings. He was formally charged with third-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, theft, and related offenses. A psychiatric evaluation determined that he was fit to stand trial. November 17, 2022, David pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, admitted his guilt, and received a sentence of 20 to 40 years in prison. With time already served, he would be eligible for parole in 2039, around his 50th birthday. David also faces another criminal case in Atlantic City, where his ex-girlfriend said he waterboarded and strangled her in a hotel room in July 2019. For Margaret's surviving relatives, this outcome felt like a betrayal. Given the horror of the crime, the photographic evidence, the forensic findings, and the digital trace, they believed he should have faced harsher charges. Margaret's daughters and sisters publicly criticized the deal and called the sentence insufficient. Ellen said, "For someone who seems to enjoy killing people, with a history of violence, he should never be out in society again." In court, David made a short statement where he expressed regret and claimed he couldn't comprehend how he committed his actions. However, his apology felt insincere. For Margaret Summey's family, this was not a moment of madness. It was the tragic culmination of a lifetime filled with manipulation, abuse, and ignored warning signs. Margaret's life ended not abruptly, but following a prolonged and preventable decline. She was not killed by a stranger, but by the very child she had always stood up for. Ellen has cut all ties with her brother, who is now a convicted murderer and no longer resembles the family member she once knew. What remains is not only profound grief but also the heavy burden of realizing that this tragedy could have been avoided. The tragic murder of Margaret Sumney is a harrowing reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked violence and systemic failures. Margaret, a loving mother, ballet teacher, and pillar of her Pennsylvania community, endured years of increasingly violent assault, manipulation, and abuse at the hands of her son, culminating in her brutal death. Despite numerous warning signs, from David's lack of empathy as a child to his violent attacks on his father and mother, the continued leniency of the legal system and Margaret's unwavering hope for redemption allowed his dangerous behavior to continue. The gruesome evidence, including photographs and videos David took during the crime, revealed a calculated and remorseless act, but his plea agreement to third-degree murder and his 20 to 40-year sentence left Margaret's family feeling betrayed by a justice system that failed to deliver proportionate consequences. This case highlights the urgent need for early intervention in cases of domestic violence, stricter enforcement of legal accountability, and increased awareness of manipulative behaviors that can escalate into tragedy. Margaret's legacy, defined by her warmth and resilience, lives on in the memories of those she touched, but her story is a wake-up call to prevent such preventable losses in the future. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Andrea Del Vesco. Andrea Del Vesco was born in Chicago, USA, in 1994. Her parents, Arthur and Leslie. Her older brother, James, was 2 years old at her birth, and her younger sister, Alexis, was born 4 years later. The family was happy and loving, moving several times before settling in Austin, Texas. Andrea's mother, Leslie, studied financial marketing at Southern Methodist University. She worked for American Airlines and then as a customer service manager in the mortgage division of Citibank. After her family was grown, she quit her job to become a stay-at-home mom. Andrea's father, Arthur, managed the family's assets as the owner of an investment firm. His hard work helped the family become quite wealthy, allowing them to live comfortably. The family's wealth enabled them to send all their children to university. Before that, the children attended a private school with a rigorous academic program taught by the best teachers in the state. From an early age, they engaged in a wide range of activities, from sports to religion, which helped instill high moral values in them. Andrea excelled academically, played sports, and developed in a well-rounded manner. She loved visiting museums and learning about art. She is kind and caring towards those around her. She has a particularly close relationship with her mother. From a young age, Andrea and her family traveled a lot, which broadened her horizons and exposed her to many different people and cultures. As she grew up, Andrea became her parents' hope and pride. In 2012, after finishing school, she applied to several educational institutions simultaneously. Her parents hoped she would attend the University of Chicago, where her older brother was studying, and for a while, Andrea preferred this option too. However, she decided to wait until she received responses from all the schools she applied to before making a decision. Ultimately, she chose the psychology department at the University of California, Los Angeles. By 2022, this university was ranked among the best in America. It has always been highly regarded and prestigious, with highly qualified teachers and a strong scientific and technical foundation. This choice reassured her family. Andrea then moved to Los Angeles to attend school. Her parents were happy with her decision and supported her choice, although they were worried that she would be too far away. Her brother would no longer be able to take care of her. With the support of her family, she began her new life. Upon arrival, Andrea needed to choose a club to join, which helped her develop lasting friendships and gain support from more experienced students. To become a full member, one usually needed to pass a test and make a small donation. The student community was very close-knit, with many students living so openly that they left their doors unlocked, allowing them to visit each other freely. Although it was generally safe, incidents could still occur. Andrea happily joined the club. She had a great sense of humor, was good-looking, and dressed well. Her impeccable style made her popular. She also created many extravagant outfits that amazed everyone. Andrea was the center of attention at any party. However, she balanced her social life with her studies. After completing her freshman year, she got a job as a paralegal at a law firm in Brentwood, handling administrative tasks. This job did not fit her schedule, so she found a new part-time job. She kept changing jobs to better balance her work and studies, allowing her to have pocket money and not have to depend on her parents. Andrea continued her student life until she graduated in 2015. She always dreamed of traveling after finishing her studies. As her senior year approached, she lived in a dormitory just 5 minutes away from the main university building. This dorm is a great place for students, hosting many sorority parties and university events. Andrea shares her living space with her sorority friends and a small dog she adopted from a rescue. She loves her pet so much that she even has a social media page dedicated to posting cute pictures of it. One day, the dog goes missing, leaving Andrea devastated as she searches frantically for it. Luckily, her beloved dog is found 5 days later. In September, Andrea is preparing to start her senior year of college, with classes scheduled to begin on September 24th. However, the fall semester officially starts on the 21st. On the 19th, she shares one of her favorite music videos on her social media page. The very next day, September 20th, 2015, is the last day before the girls in the club return to school. Everyone was having fun on the balcony of the apartment building. Andrea was at a club activity until 3 in the morning with her friend Jessica. Jessica then went to her bedroom around 3:30 and went to sleep, while Andrea lay on the couch in the living room. However, Andrea could not sleep that night. A few hours later, Samantha, another neighbor, came running to Andrea's door, screaming about a fire. Andrea's door was closed, which was unusual because she always left her room open for her friends in the club. Samantha tried to open the door but couldn't, so she called the other girls to help. Together, with great difficulty, they managed to open the door and found the room filled with smoke and fire. They found Andrea lying motionless on the bed but could not call her because of the danger. Realizing that they could not safely enter the room, the girls evacuated and called 9 people at a time. They waited on the sidewalk for help. Later, the fire truck arrived at the scene. Firefighters quickly used hoses to extinguish the fire on the second floor. A total of 32 firefighters worked to effectively extinguish the fire. After the incident, rumors spread among the students that Andrea was dead, as she had not escaped the building and was not seen. When the firefighters finally entered the room, they found the body of a woman lying on her bed. During the investigation, the police determined that the fire started in Andrea's bedroom. At the scene, the police were unable to identify the deceased because her face was disfigured by the fire. They were only able to confirm that it was a female body. Fingerprints could not be taken because her hands were too badly burned. Surprisingly, the girl's small dog was found by firefighters. The dog was severely burned, barely breathing at the feet of its owner. However, it was later decided to euthanize the dog to reduce its suffering. After the incident, the dormitory students were relocated to different housing while repairs started on the burned building. The girls were frightened, leading the university to enhance campus security. Everyone believed that Andrea was the victim of the fire since all other students were confirmed safe during roll call. They reported seeing Andrea lying on her bed in the room that was on fire and were puzzled as to why she did not get up and leave. They found it odd and speculated that she might have lost consciousness, suffocated from carbon monoxide, or had already died. Andrea's parents returned to Austin from a long trip, unaware of what had happened to their daughter. They began to worry when Andrea did not reach out to them, and their attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. Concerned, her mother called one of their neighbors and learned about the fire, which might have involved Andrea. However, the police had not yet confirmed the identity of the body found at the scene. The entire family gathered to pray for Andrea's safety and traveled to Los Angeles. Meanwhile, police began investigating the case. They discovered that Jessica, Andrea's neighbor, was the last person to communicate with her before the tragedy. Police planned to interview Jessica to gather details about their last conversation, hoping she might have witnessed something important. Police interviewed Jessica to learn how the fire started, but her answers were not helpful. She quickly stated that she saw nothing and had no idea what caused the fire. Friends from the sisterhood, who also spoke with the police, suggested that Andrea may have accidentally fallen asleep with an aromatic candle still lit. They were convinced that the fire was not set intentionally, as Andrea had no enemies or anyone who wished her harm. To verify this theory, a detailed examination of the incident scene was needed. Initially, they inspected electrical appliances and outlets for any short circuits, but everything appeared to be in order. No candles were found at the scene, and the only item that raised suspicion was the trash can located at the head of the bed. Experienced firefighters speculated that this could be the starting point of the fire. However, friends and members of the sisterhood confirmed that Andrea never slept near the trash can, which was typically placed at the opposite end of the room. Unfortunately, the contents of the can could not be identified without a detailed chemical analysis, as everything was completely destroyed. Forensic experts specializing in arson were called in to investigate. 2 hours after the fire was put out, police were convinced that it was not accidental. The critical piece of evidence was a metal trash can, which someone could have used to pour flammable liquid and ignite a fire. The flames originated near the head of the girl's bed and spread throughout the room. Forensic experts confirmed their suspicions when it was clear that the fire was intentionally set. The investigation at the crime scene intensified. Forensic experts found a large number of traces of blood splashes on the bed and around it, with most of the stains surviving the fire. Police were concerned when neighbors reported trying to call the Andrea as they entered her room at the start of the fire, but she did not respond and was found lying motionless. They feared she was already dead and suspected that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. By this time, the police had already pieced together a rough timeline of the events from that tragic evening. They interviewed many students, focusing mainly on the roommates. According to the roommates, a group of girls had been chatting on the balcony before entering the apartment building. The last confirmed sighting of Andrea alive was at 5:50 a.m. Samantha, her roommate, was preparing for work on campus and saw that Andrea was sleeping on the couch in the living room at that time. Samantha left for work and returned around 6:30 a.m., but Andrea was no longer on the couch. She had gone to her room, but this time her door was closed, which was unusual for her. This behavior struck Samantha as odd, and she wondered why Andrea had suddenly gone to her room and shut the door, especially after being fast asleep before. Feeling concerned, Samantha noted this difference when she then saw the fire. While talking to other students in the dorm, the police discovered a significant clue. A girl named Sarah returned to her room around 5:30 a.m. after dropping her boyfriend off at the airport. Her apartment was directly above Andrea's room. Since it was still dark at that hour, Sarah noticed a male figure as she tried to open her front door. The building was for women, but it wasn't unusual for guys to visit their girlfriends, so she didn't think much of it at first. However, she became alarmed when the man immediately ran away upon seeing her, as if he was trying to hide. This frightened and confused her. She described the man as wearing a black baseball cap, a black and white t-shirt, and dark jeans. Feeling scared, Sarah hurried into her room and locked the door. Once inside, she quickly texted her boyfriend to tell him about the suspicious man she had seen. Unsure whether he posed a threat or if she should contact the police, she shared her concerns. Her boyfriend reassured her that it was likely just someone visiting, suggesting there was no need to panic. Later Sarah went to bed, but around 6:15, she was awakened by a woman's scream and the frantic barking of a dog from the room below her, where Andrea lived. This startled her, especially since the dog had never barked before and usually stayed calm. She realized something was wrong downstairs. Sarah tried to reach Andrea to check on her, but couldn't get in touch. She called 911, but the emergency services didn't take her seriously because the area was known for its student parties and noise. Still, a patrol car was dispatched to the dormitory. The police arrived around 6:23 but left a few minutes later without updating Sarah on their findings. They reported seeing nothing unusual, no person, no barking dog, and no screams. They only shined their flashlights into Andrea's room from the street without conducting a thorough investigation. Believing that someone might have had too much to drink or had an argument that upset the dog, the police decided to leave. Meanwhile, Sarah was watching from the window and tried calling Andrea, but no one answered. She also tried to contact the other girls in the building, but it seemed that everyone was asleep. After the police left, she heard a loud bang at around 6:45 a.m. Sarah rushed to the balcony and looked down, seeing thick smoke rising. She also spotted a stranger in a black and white t-shirt jumping from the balcony below. Panicking, Sarah feared that the man had harmed Andrea. She quickly grabbed her phone and called 911 to report the situation, then ran downstairs, where other students had gathered near Andrea's room, trying to open the door. Sarah quickly left the building to chase the intruder. She spotted him and ran after him down the street, but he escaped by getting into a red Nissan and driving away. Sarah recalled a detail on the car window that had a fraternity sticker. Meanwhile, Andrea's friends had made it into her room. They called out to her, but there was no response. The students claimed they saw her lying motionless on her bed, surrounded by flames. Several girls noticed blood on her neck, chest, and shoulders. In a panic, the friends left the burning house and saw the red Nissan speeding away, with Sarah in pursuit. However, none of Andrea's friends could identify anyone who might have wanted to harm her. All of her friends had cared for her, and at the time of her death, she was not in a romantic relationship. The investigation looked into the possibility of a robbery, but nothing was stolen from Andrea's room. It is thought that Andrea may have met someone on Tinder and the date did not go well. But this has not been confirmed as there are no leads. The police reviewed the surveillance footage from the campus, but it was unhelpful because of its poor quality. They searched all nearby streets for a red Nissan car with a fraternity sticker that had been spotted near the crime scene. Police interviewed all the students, focusing on fraternity members and residents of nearby homes. Nicholas and Mohair later reported a burglary, claiming that their laptops and speakers had been stolen, and one of them said that the keys to his red Nissan were also missing. This occurred on the same evening as Andrea's murder. A few days after the fire, police officially identified the charred remains as belonging to 21-year-old Andrea Delvesco, using dental records provided by her family. An autopsy conducted on September 22 indicated that she was wearing only a sports bra at the time of her death, which raised suspicions of rape, although this could not be confirmed due to the condition of her body. Most of her hair had been burned away, and there was significant blood loss, particularly from the back of her head. Approximately 90% of her body was burned. Forensic experts found multiple fatal stab wounds on Andrea's body, mainly to her head and neck. She had 5 stab wounds on the right side of her neck and 2 on the left, for a total of 19 stab wounds. The lack of soot and carbon monoxide in her body suggests that Andrea was dead before the fire started. This suggests that the fire was an attempt to cover up the crime rather than the cause of death. As a result, the investigation was upgraded to a murder case, creating a sense of fear across the campus. On the day the official forensic report was made public, police traced a stolen laptop and speakers to a man named Joseph in Fresno, California, which is over 3 hours from the crime scene. Police quickly going to his address. When police met Joseph, he claimed that he had borrowed the speakers from his roommate and that he had done nothing wrong. The situation became more complicated when the stolen items were passed around. His friend was Alberto Medina. Alberto claimed that he had lent the items to Joseph, explaining that his friends, who were moving out, had given them to him for safekeeping. However, Alberto then disappeared. Police began searching for Alberto on September 24. He was arrested 2 days later and brought in for questioning. Alberto's testimony was inconsistent. He said that on September 18, he went to the University of California with his friend Eric Marquez. They spent the week together, attending a Chris Brown concert and then going to a party with friends who had laptops and speakers. Under pressure from police, Alberto eventually confessed that he had stolen the items from random people while intoxicated and unaware of his actions, and returned home around 5:30 a.m. The police noted that the fire had not started at that time. When questioned about a suspicious stranger, Alberto unexpectedly claimed he was attacked by someone with a gun while they were returning with the stolen items. The attacker fired at them but missed, allowing them to escape. Alberto described the attacker as wearing dark jeans and a black and white t-shirt, matching the description Sarah had previously given. However, the police still expressed doubts about Alberto's story. Alberto suddenly remembered that his friend Eric had visited Andrea, a beautiful blonde woman he met at a party that same weekend. Eric planned to be intimate with her. When Eric returns to the apartment, he acts strange and nervous. Eric says he hit her, and urges Alberto to leave quickly. Alberto's account implicates Eric in Andrea's murder. 5 days after the murder, the police interviewed a new suspect named Eric Marquez. He was 22 years old and a fifth-year medical student at the university. Eric had no previous legal problems and was viewed as a good person. His friend Alberto pointed the police to his home, which was only a 5-minute walk from the crime scene. However, getting Eric to confess was challenging. He stated that he spent the entire weekend drinking at home and hardly went out. Alberto and Eric's testimony was confirmed by surveillance camera footage from their home. When the footage was reviewed, both Eric and Alberto were active from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m., frequently wandering the streets. Alberto was wearing a black and white t-shirt and dark jeans. At 4 a.m., Alberto and Eric left the house for an extended period of time. Alberto was easily recognized by the distinctive tattoos on his arms. A key moment in the footage is Alberto returning to the apartment at around 7:11 a.m., with Andrea's red blanket wrapped around him. This corresponds to the time of the arson. Additionally, a red Nissan, matching Sarah's description, was spotted on video. By 7:30 a.m., Alberto and Eric were seen leaving the house again to throw away some trash. At this time, Alberto was shirtless and Eric had changed his clothing. While the cameras captured this evidence, Eric insisted he could not remember anything. Police obtained a search warrant for Alberto and Eric's apartment. A thorough inspection revealed that Alberto had suffered abrasions to his hands, while Eric had no similar injuries. Police found the red Nissan, which had blood on the steering wheel, dashboard, and driver's door, along with trash and a black sock inside. In the apartment's closet, police discovered a trash bag filled with bloody clothing, Andrea's underwear, and a black sock that matched the sock found in the car, a bloody knife, and a blanket missing from Andrea's room. After conducting the inspection, police gathered enough evidence to formally charge Alberto and Eric. On September 28, Alberto and Eric were charged with murder and burglary, and Albert was additionally charged with arson. Despite the threat of the death penalty, both pleaded not guilty. Their families insisted on a thorough, independent investigation, unable to accept that their son could have committed such a heinous act. Police later interviewed Joseph Garcia, who was found using a stolen laptop and speakers. He claimed that he had witnessed Alberto and Eric returning home that evening. Alberto had confided in him about the incident at the dormitory. He had entered Andrea's room after watching her while she walked her dog, then snuck inside. Alberto took a knife from the kitchen, forced Andrea into the room, and locked the door. He raped her, and when she screamed and fought back, he stabbed her to death and burned the house to cover up his crime. Alberto threatened Joseph to keep quiet. An expert found DNA evidence that showed blood on the suspect's clothes and car matched Andrea's DNA. Additionally, a witness named Julio, a cleaner, observed Alberto getting out of his car and walking toward Andrea's dorm. Julio noted that Alberto had a large tattoo on his arm and was wearing a black and white t-shirt. Alberto and Eric both appeared drunk and said they needed to go to Andrea's room because she needed help. Police determined that Alberto had entered the building while Eric was still in the car, so the blood was only found on the driver's side. Andrea's family was outraged by the police's inaction when Sarah first raised her concerns. The officers neglected to check Andrea's room, the likely scene of the crime. The Los Angeles Police Department announced that the officers involved have been suspended and an internal investigation has been launched to look into their negligence in responding to a call from the victim's friend, Sarah. The findings of that investigation have been submitted to the court. Although the officers were acquitted but were still fired. In the fall of 2016, Eric went on trial for his role in Andrea's murder, along with charges of robbery and arson. Eric and Alberto were charged with animal cruelty due to the injuries Andrea's dog suffered in the fire. In September 2017, the possibility of the death penalty was considered for Alberto. His attorneys urged him to accept a plea deal to receive a lighter sentence and avoid the death penalty, but he refused. As a result, the case was split into two separate trials. Eric was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months after pleading guilty to accessory and abetting. It was determined that he did not participate in the murder or arson. He remained in the car throughout the incident. Alberto Medina's trial began on May 15, 2018. He faced a jury on 5 different charges. Despite this, Alberto chose not to accept the plea deal offered by the prosecution. On May 24, 2018, after extensive deliberation, Alberto pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, arson, animal cruelty, and burglary. The judge decided against the death penalty, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, the court imposed another 12 years for other charges. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Hannah Hill. Hannah Hill was an 18-year-old girl from Akron, Ohio, born on May 8, 1981. She had a brother named Justin. By the time she turned 18, she had graduated high school and was ready to begin her adult life. Hannah started searching for a job and secured a part-time position as a secretary. After summer, she planned to attend college. With her job, she was able to save money to buy a car. Hannah was beautiful and well-liked in high school. She had many friends and maintained close relationships with them. Hannah had a 19-year-old boyfriend named Brad. They lived together for a while, but their relationship became troubled, leading Hannah to move back in with her parents. A friend later informed Hannah's parents that the couple frequently argued, and these disputes usually ended with Brad hurling insults. When that didn't work, he sometimes resorted to physical force to assert his viewpoint. Despite these issues and her move back home, their romance continued. Friends advised Hannah to end the relationship, believing Brad was not right for her. However, Hannah finds herself attracted to him, as he is her type. On May 19, 1999, Hannah came home from work in the afternoon, as she usually did. After having dinner, taking a bath, and changing into her pajamas, she settled down to watch a movie. Hannah had no plans to go out that evening. However, while she was getting ready for bed, her friend Jennifer called. They talked for a while, and then Hannah unexpectedly decided to change her plans. Around 10 p.m., she changed her clothes and left the house. She told her mother she was going out for business and appeared worried as she hurried away. Her parents didn't have time to ask her questions or understand what was happening. Although they noticed that the phone call seemed to upset her, they weren't overly concerned since Hannah was an adult and often spent nights with her boyfriend or friends. They had no idea that this was the last time they would see their daughter alive. When the parents woke up in the morning, they noticed that their daughter had not returned home at the expected time. This was not unusual, as Hannah sometimes slept over at her boyfriend's house or stayed out late with friends. At first, they were not worried. However, they then received a call from her company, informing them that Hannah had not come to work. This worried them, as it was unusual for her to be absent from work, considering how seriously she took her job. The parents began texting Hannah, but she did not respond. They continued to wait throughout the evening, still unable to find out where she was. They began to worry about her safety. After calling Hannah's friends and boyfriend, but no one had seen her, her parents contacted the police to report her missing. They gave a description of Hannah and mentioned that her car was also missing, suggesting that she had driven away. Despite this, the police did not launch an investigation. They believed that Hannah was just having fun and would come back on her own, so they postponed the case. This time, Hannah's parents sensed something was really wrong. Hannah seemed to have disappeared without a trace and had not contacted anyone. Realizing that the police were not prioritizing the investigation, they decided to take matters into their own hands. First, they contacted Hannah's boyfriend, but he, like everyone else, had no idea where she was. He said he had tried to contact her, but she had not responded to his messages. Next, the parents started asking Hannah's friends for information. They spoke to Denny, but he also said he had been unable to contact Hannah despite repeated attempts. 2 days later, passers-by reported the abandoned car they had found on the side of the road to the police. The car was found just a few miles from Hannah's home. Witnesses noted that the car looked suspicious because it appeared to have been unused for more than 2 days. Unfortunately, the police did not take Hannah's parents' report seriously. As a result, other police were unaware that the car's owner was missing and were unable to connect the 1996 Geoprism Hannah was driving to the witness reports. As a result, one of the patrol officers was dispatched to the location to simply write a parking ticket, and he took no further action. The next day, Brad contacted the police station where the report was filed. He was angry that the police had not begun an investigation or search for Hannah. He insisted that they take immediate action. After speaking with him, the police reviewed Hannah's parents' missing person report and decided it was time to start looking for her. They also noticed scratches on her boyfriend's body and asked about them. He explained that they had argued shortly before her disappearance due to his infidelity, and during the fight Hannah had attacked him. Although the injuries did not appear to be serious, they raised some suspicions among the police. However, no evidence linking him to Hannah's disappearance was found and he left the police station without incident. His visit helped to advance the investigation and details of Hannah's disappearance were shared with the media. Police hope to find witnesses who can provide further information. Some information about Hannah has emerged. Someone contacted the police after seeing Hannah's car, which was the same car that a patrol officer had been sent to ticket a short time earlier. By May 26, the car had been parked on the side of the road for a week without anyone coming to pick it up or reporting it. That day, several officers were sent to check on the car. They arrived at the location at 7:30 a.m. The car showed no signs of forced entry or theft. When the officers opened the trunk, they made a horrifying discovery. Hannah's body was inside. This was reported on the news the same day. The body was in a state of decomposition after being in the trunk of a car for a week in hot weather. Hannah was found with her bra pulled around her neck. Her knees were bent and spread, leading police to suspect a sexual motive behind the crime. Hannah had bruises, scratches, and cuts, indicating that she had fought back. Her pager and car keys were found next to her body. Many local residents were outraged that the police did not take her parents' missing person report seriously and did not list her and her car as missing. Hannah remained in the trunk of her car for a week. When a patrol officer arrived to issue a ticket, he did not inspect the car or contact the owner. Many speculate that Hannah may have been alive and the first police arrived and may have been rescued. Even if she had not, the investigation would have begun much sooner, and the passing of a week would have risked losing crucial evidence. Forensic experts conducted an autopsy and determined that Hannah's cause of death was strangulation. They discovered that she had been gagged, found a white substance on her lips, and noted a bite mark on one of her hands. Her body was covered in bruises and abrasions. Additionally, it was established that she had had an intimate encounter with a man shortly before her death. Forensic experts suspected that she may have been raped based on the positioning of her body, her torn clothes, and the nature of her injuries. It appeared that she had resisted and was strangled before being placed in the trunk. A toxicology report revealed a small amount of alcohol in her system, despite her leaving home completely sober, suggesting she had consumed alcohol elsewhere. Police initially considered Brad the prime suspect because intimate partners were often involved in such cases. When he arrived at the station, they noticed suspicious scratches on his body. Hannah's parents also suspect him of being involved in her disappearance, as they never liked him. During a search of Hannah's home, police found her diary, which detailed her relationship with her boyfriend. They learned that he had been both emotionally and physically abusive towards her, which was confirmed by her diary entries and several witness accounts. The police brought Brad in for questioning. He claimed to have an alibi for the night of her disappearance, stating he was at a party with friends, where they watched TV and drank. Although his alibi was shaky, he passed a polygraph test. Police found him to be genuinely upset and concerned about Hannah, and his body language suggested he was being truthful. The police obtained a recording of Hannah's phone calls that night. They discovered that she had made 4 calls from her home phone. 1 call was to her friend, 2 calls were to Brad, and another call was to a guy named Denny Ross, who was a friend of her boyfriend, Brad. The police then checked Hannah's pager. They discovered that on the night of her disappearance, she had sent several messages to her friends, including Denny, who was mentioned in her diary. Recently, they had become closer and often talked to each other. However, Hannah's friend insisted that their relationship was not romantic. They became friends mainly because Denny's house was a popular spot for parties, as he lived alone without his parents, allowing people to enjoy themselves freely. Their interactions were purely friendly. The police began to view Denny, Hannah's friend, as a suspect in her murder since he might have been the last person to see her alive. Friends described Denny as potentially aggressive, stating that he always got what he wanted and could behave rudely. Police discovered that Denny had a legal problem 2 weeks before Hannah went missing. He had been arrested while selling illegal drugs for $500. Denny quickly admitted to drug possession and trafficking charges. On May 26, he received a suspended sentence for his drug trafficking charges. Police went to Denny's home to question him and investigate his possible involvement in Hannah's disappearance and murder. When police arrived, they found Denny wearing a cast on his arm. Surprisingly, he was on the phone and told police he was talking to a lawyer. Denny claimed that he had injured his hand in a fight a few weeks earlier. When speaking to the police, he mentioned that Hannah had called him around 11 p.m. on the night she went missing. He also provided a significant amount of new information that he had not disclosed in previous interviews related to the case. The police found this disturbing, so he was taken to the police station for further questioning. At the station, Denny said that night, he and Hannah talked for a long time about her boyfriend. She arrived feeling upset and unhappy in her relationship, expressing her frustrations and appearing ready to end it. After their lengthy conversation, they shared a kiss, and then she left around 1:30 a.m. He claimed he never saw her again and insisted she was completely sober. They didn't drink that night. Denny believed Hannah had feelings for him, and he was also in love with her. It was unusual for a man who was in love and possibly Hannah's new boyfriend to choose not to help find her when he had the chance. This raised suspicions, prompting police to quickly obtain a search warrant for Denny's home. On the morning of May 27th, 15 police officers arrived at Denny's second-floor apartment. They found several small bloodstains that he could not explain, which was very concerning. Blood samples were sent to the lab for analysis. Outside, under a bush, they found a trash bag. One officer noticed what appeared to be a woman's shoe inside. When the officers opened the bag, they found women's pants, underwear, and shoes, all of which were stained with blood. It was confirmed that these items belonged to Hannah and had her blood on them. One of the police officers reported hearing a noise outside the window while he was going up the stairs. At that moment, Denny reportedly threw the evidence bag onto the street. Denny was later arrested. However, he maintained his innocence. His father hired the city's top lawyers to defend him in court. The defense team carefully reviewed the case file and the evidence gathered during the investigation. By this time, a collection of evidence had been compiled. Along with Hannah's DNA, traces of Denny were found in a garbage bag. The white residue on the Hannah's lips contained his DNA, and a bite mark on her neck matched Denny's dental impressions. Male bodily fluid was found on the Hannah, but after being there for a week, it was no longer suitable for analysis. Police believe that Denny not only killed her but also attacked, forced, and raped her. The defense argued that Denny's DNA found on Hannah's lips and the bite mark did not prove that he had killed her. It only showed that they had intimate contact. Furthermore, the defense emphasized that the police mishandled the initial investigation, leading to a lengthy delay in locating Hannah's disappearance. Instead of finding her within hours of her parents reporting the incident, it took police a week. To cover up their negligence, the attorneys argued the police tried to charge the first person they encountered. The attorneys noted that the police did not interview enough potential witnesses and did not look for other suspects, focusing only on Denny. The attorneys said that several bags of fast food were found in Hannah's car and that Hannah had stopped at a fast food restaurant shortly before her death. However, the police did not go to the restaurant to interview the staff. It is possible that Hannah encountered a dangerous person during her trip to the restaurant, leading to the attack and subsequent death. The defense argued that the blood found at Denny's house did not belong to Hannah, and that it was unreasonable to think that Denny with a broken arm could have raped and murdered a girl in his own home, since he could not have overpowered her with such an injury, especially given the complete lack of DNA evidence linking him to the victim's car and the evidence bag. The attorney argued that someone had intentionally framed Denny. The police have a different opinion. When police arrived at Denny's home, he allegedly threw an evidence bag out the window. However, Denny maintained that he did not throw the bag out the window. There were no fingerprints on the bag, and it did not match any trash bags he had at home. Police also did not test the temperature of the bag, making it impossible to determine whether it had been outside for minutes or hours. Meanwhile, Hannah Hill was buried in a family plot in Kentucky the day after her 19th birthday. The trial of Denny Ross began on October 17, 2000. Hannah's friend, Jennifer Edwards, was the first to testify. She described Denny as an unreliable person who could be aggressive and physically violent. Jennifer said that after Hannah disappeared, she visited him. But he claimed that he had not seen Hannah before she disappeared, although in fact, they had met, which meant that he was hiding something. The lawyers argued that the bag had been placed under Denny's house by the real criminal. They stressed that Denny had no motive to kill Hannah. They were not romantically involved, they simply liked each other and had a future together. So why would he kill Hannah, the person he loved, and give up the chance to be with her? The defense argued that the Brad, who was extremely jealous and had previously been violent towards Hannah, might have been driven by jealousy towards Denny, leading him to kill his partner. The defense also pointed to scratches on the Brad's body that he had when he arrived at the police station. He admitted that Hannah had caused the scratches but claimed they occurred before her disappearance. However, this could have been a lie. The police's failure to investigate his statement thoroughly and the prolonged search for Hannah's body could result in significant penalties for police due to negligence. Thus, the defense believed the police were eager to close the case quickly to avoid facing serious consequences. Forensic experts had compelling evidence that the girl had been intimate before her death but were unable to prove this due to the state of decomposition. By the time the body was discovered, it was already quite badly decomposed, making it difficult to draw conclusions. However, the prosecution claimed that the nature of the injuries found on Hannah's body, her position, and the state of her clothing suggested that she had been brutally raped. A chemist analyzed the white substance found on Hannah's lips. The results showed that it was a common compound that could not be definitively linked to Denny. The expert noted that the same material was used in many different products. Therefore, it was impossible to determine with certainty that Denny was involved in the white substance on her lips. Meanwhile, the defense team has been working hard to prevent rape charges against Denny Ross, because under state law, he could face the death penalty for both murder and rape. At the time, the jury found the evidence bag near Denny's house suspicious. They struggled to understand why Denny would have kept the victim's clothes there for a week. Furthermore, if someone threw the open bag from the second floor, there was a chance that the contents would fall out. Instead, the bag lay neatly, as if it had been placed there intentionally to attract the attention of the police. As the jury deliberated their verdict, they discovered that a juror had reviewed documents related to Hannah prior to the trial. By law, jurors are not allowed to have third-party information in advance because it could create bias and influence their opinions. As a result, the trial was deemed invalid and a new jury had to be held. However, because the documents declaring Denny Ross innocent of rape had already been signed, he could not be indicted again for the same crime. As a result, the jury was discharged and Denny was granted a temporary release. After a year of probation, the main suspect was sentenced to 25 years in prison after he attacked with a knife and raped another girl, 32-year-old Jennifer. He beat her severely, breaking her collarbone and jaw. The girl pretended to be dead so that he would leave. She immediately contacted the police afterward. It is unknown whether he would have killed her if he had noticed signs of life. Investigators thought that she was very lucky, as Jennifer bore a strong resemblance to the deceased Hannah. Following this, the discussion of the murder of Hannah Hill resumed with renewed vigor. Despite the fact that a man could not be tried twice for the same crime of rape, he could be tried for murder. Therefore, a new trial took place. The only thing he could not be sentenced to was death in court. In addition to the old evidence and witnesses, new ones were discussed. In particular, ex-girlfriends of Dennis spoke, claiming that he inclined them to intimate relations and used violence. Mutual friends of Dennis and Hannah testified that the defendant was obsessed with the deceased and, after the discovery of her body, he boasted that he had slept with her and even strangled her. During the retrial, the prosecution's case was much stronger. DNA testing had advanced significantly since Hannah's death, allowing experts to detect Dennis's DNA in drops of blood on Hannah's trousers and underwear. Dennis's DNA was also found under the fingernails on Hannah's left hand and on the deceased's t-shirt. A witness was found who saw Dennis throwing something out of the window of his apartment. When police discovered the bag with the victim's clothes outside, this witness also stated that she heard screams from Dennis Ross's house on the night of her disappearance and was sure that he was the one who raped and killed the girl. The witness even listened to a phone conversation in which they were discussing Hannah. The state appealed and that decision was overturned. Denny could have faced a retrial and he returned to court in 2012 to face murder charges. The trial also mentioned his attack on Jennifer, who survived and survived. Jennifer said that they met at a bar, had a few beers, and she invited him to her house with friends. However, when they returned, Jennifer began to feel unwell and asked everyone to leave. Everyone left, except Denny, who went upstairs to use the bathroom. After a while, Jennifer went looking for Denny. When she found him, he attacked her, stabbed her in the face and dragged her down the stairs. He hit her with such force that he broke her jaw and collarbone. Denny threatened to kill her children if she tried to escape. When Jennifer tried to run away, he choked her from behind. He raped her while holding a knife and continued to choke her. Jennifer was shocked when she couldn't breathe and passed out several times. She pretended to be dead, at which point Denny released her but showed no concern for her condition. Denny eventually kicked her several times, but she remained still, and he eventually left. She then called 911. Jennifer spent 6 months recovering in the hospital. In response to his testimony, Denny claimed it was a lie and insisted that they had consensual sex. When asked about Jennifer's injuries, he suggested that she must have fallen or been attacked by someone else, denying any involvement. Denny's father, Alan, defended his son during the trial. He explained that he was at Denny's house when Hannah arrived that night. She was crying and depressed after an argument with her boyfriend. Hannah needed Denny's support, and they talked to each other instead of going out. By the end of the night, she had made it out safely. Alan believed that Hannah may have been attacked outside, but he insisted that it was not his son who hurt her. The prosecution presented a different version of events, claiming that Hannah, upset over an argument with her boyfriend, went to Denny for comfort because she trusted him. They alleged that Denny took advantage of her vulnerability and began harassing her, but she refused. The prosecution raised doubts about Alan's presence in the house, noting that Denny lived alone. With the new evidence, the jury concluded that there was enough evidence to convict him. As a result, Denny Ross was convicted of murder and tampering with evidence. 13 years after Hannah Hill's death, Denny was sentenced to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 19 years, when he will be 67 years old. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Rachel Winkler. Rachel Hatfield was born in California in 1975. She is the second of 4 children to her parents, Don and Diana. When she was 10, her father left after her mother had a brief affair with a neighbor, so her parents divorced. Rachel, her siblings, and their mother then moved to Georgia. Then, she and her siblings rarely visited their father because of their strained relationship. Their mother had turned them against him, resulting in a lost custody battle for the father. The family breakup deeply affected Rachel, making it difficult for her to cope with her parents' separation. During her teenage years, she developed anorexia due to stress, and her weight dropped to a dangerous 30 kilograms. She was hospitalized at a psychiatric clinic in Modesto, where she received effective treatment. She eventually recovered, and even took up sports. After her recovery, she started to reconnect with her father, Don. He is proud of his daughter because she is very intelligent and the only girl in the family. The girl is the inspiration for his work. In school, she consistently achieved excellent grades across all subjects. As an adult, Rachel has dedicated herself to her work, with the desire to follow the example of his father, Don, a famous painter. In high school, Rachel met her boyfriend, Tim, who was also an artist. After finishing school, they moved in together. They faced their first difficulties in life, which were financial problems that people in the same profession often face, until they became famous and found their place. When they didn't have painting commissions, they created frescoes to decorate rooms, which turned out to be more profitable. This allowed them to rent more comfortable housing. Rachel attended the University of Sonoma, earning a degree in business and marketing. She excelled in mathematics, impressing her teachers from the start. After graduating with excellent degrees, she was offered a high-paying job, which she accepted. Nevertheless, she continued to support Tim and their art business. They had been together for 14 years, and everyone who knew them was confident they had a bright future ahead, with marriage and children. It seemed they were meant for each other. As Rachel approached the age of 30, she started thinking about becoming a mother. However, Tim was hesitant to support this idea. He wanted to first stabilize their finances, buy a house, and establish himself in his career. Realizing that this would take a long time, so she became impatient, not wanting to wait. This led to conflicts, and their once harmonious relationship began to deteriorate. By July 2005, their relationship was nearly over. Around this time, Rachel attended a dinner party where she met Todd Winkler. He was 8 years older than her and had built a successful career as a fighter pilot in the U.S. Air Force. When they met, he also held a degree in computer engineering and ran a successful internet business. He was wealthy, owning a large house and even a plane. In addition to his success, he was attractive and very sociable. Todd had been married twice before. He married his first wife at a young age, but they later divorced due to disillusionment. His second wife tragically died in a car accident in 1999. Eager to find love again, Todd was searching for the right partner. When he met Rachel, he immediately felt she was that person. She was equally captivated by he, and they quickly sparked a romance. She ended her relationship with her boyfriend, Tim, to start dating Todd. Rachel and Todd were so in love that, after just a few weeks of meeting, they were thinking about a future together and having children. Less than a month after they met, he invited she to a party, and then he proposed to her. She was so moved that she agreed immediately. Unfortunately for Tim, although he tried to mend his relationship with her, he was unsuccessful. Rachel informed her family and friends that she is very much in love with Todd, the man of her dreams, who had already proposed to her, and they planned to marry that summer. They had a beautiful wedding, and Rachel took her husband's last name, Winkler. This new chapter opened up opportunities she had only dreamed of. Together, they aimed to build a bright future. She quickly forgot the past that she lived with her ex-boyfriend for more than 10 years, with whom she overcame many different difficulties. A year after the wedding, Rachel became pregnant and she was overjoyed. On April 11, 2007, she and her wealthy husband, Todd, welcomed their daughter, Eva, and she adored her child. A year later, their second child, Ariel, was born. During this time, Rachel stays at home doing housework and taking care of the children while her husband goes to work. In early 2010, their family had big changes when Todd was accepted as a manager in a prestigious pharmaceutical company, 2 hours from their home. As a result, he started working late at his office in Alameda. During this time, the family lived in an area reserved for the extremely wealthy, where each had their own garage to park their personal jet. Feeling tired of her life at home, Rachel took a job as a manager at the nearby airport, a decision Todd supported. In September 2009, when Todd was working away from home, Rachel met a man named James White, who was doing repair work, and they struck up a friendly conversation. Around this time, her relationship with Todd began to deteriorate. The attachment and attraction they once felt for each other had faded. According to Rachel's relatives, she no longer seemed as happy or radiant as before. Todd discovered her relationship with James and was upset that she was spending more time with James, his colleague, than with him. He began to suspect that Rachel was developing feelings for James. Concerned, he sought advice from his father-in-law, Don, who followed the Ozan religion and upheld family values. Don strongly objected of his daughter's behavior, and he and Todd believed she was behaving inappropriately. Don viewed the situation from his own perspective, as a similar experience led his family to fall apart. After that, he spoke face-to-face with his daughter, Rachel, believing he could understand her and save her relationship with Todd. Don explained that he should not have ended things with Diana over affair. A year after his divorce, he reconsidered the situation and realized that he should not have left his wife and children, but should have forgiven his wife. Because of his stubbornness, everyone faced serious difficulties. However, in his case, he could no longer change anything, so he asked his daughter to reconsider and leave James, and she promised to think about it. Despite her father's advice and opposition from Todd and others, Rachel continued to communicate with James, whom she adored. She admitted to her friends that she had fallen in love with James. Todd realized his marriage was crumbling, so he frequently sought advice from Rachel's father, Don, who persuaded him to fight for the marriage. After a while, Rachel realized that her father was right. She also knew that she would not be able to raise her child properly if she continued to have an affair. Therefore, she chose to mend her relationship with Todd. Her father was pleased that she heeded his advice and preserved the family. Todd forgave her, and their relationship improved. A few months later, they announced to friends and family that she is pregnant with her third child. Although he hoped for a son to inherit his business, his wife was content with having a third daughter. In March 2011, the couple left their children with Rachel's father, Don, and went on vacation to Florida to strengthen their relationship. It seemed their relationship had improved, as if they had rekindled their love. Rachel affirms that the child she is pregnant with is Todd's child, but some suspected she might be pregnant by her lover, James. However, not everything was smooth in the family. Behind their family's happy exterior are arguments. After the vacation, they had a big fight, and Todd went to Australia on business, he staying there for some time. He even paid for Don's trip to visit him but didn't invite his wife and children, possibly because the long trip could be difficult for the children and the pregnant Rachel. Alternatively, this might indicate serious issues in their relationship. In Australia, he and Don enjoyed their time, relaxing and having fun almost every evening. Rachel, who had been apart from her husband, Todd, for a long time, occasionally reached out to her first boyfriend, Tim, who was an artist. She shared stories from her life with Tim, such as an incident involving credit cards. Todd had issued several cards in her name and even bought a plane under her name, leaving her with a $50,000 debt. However, Todd quickly paid off the debt, which didn't seem to be a problem for him. It seemed like she was boasting about her wealth. Tim still had feelings for Rachel, and it was difficult for him to hear these stories. But he held on to a small hope that they might get back together. When she was alone with the children and feeling bored, Rachel decided to pursue her ambitions. She returned to work at the airport and sent her children to kindergarten. Her father, Don, disapproved because he was religious and believed that a woman should stay home to care for her children. Additionally, since they were wealthy, there was no financial need for her to work. However, Rachel was determined to continue her career, and eventually, her father relented, allowing her to work and interact with others. During this time, Rachel's former lover, James, started his own business near where she worked. Her father advised her to avoid James to resist any temptation, as he sensed there was more than just friendship between them. James had been married twice, with his second marriage ending in divorce, and he was seeking a new relationship. However, he didn't want to break up another family, so he kept his distance from her. As time went on, the situation evolved. In early June 2010, Rachel called James and said that she was blindly in love with him and that she did not want to live with Todd anymore, which left James confused. Although both were married at the time, but James still loved Rachel, and they began meeting secretly. Rachel's husband, Todd, frequent business trips to Australia, which allowed James and Rachel to meet without obstacles. James even improved his relationship with Rachel's children. The hardest thing for Rachel and James was keeping their relationship a secret from their neighbors. At times, they acted too openly, leading to rumors about their secret affair. Eventually, James couldn't keep the relationship secret any longer and filed for divorce. He confessed to his wife that he loved Rachel. His wife was furious and informed Todd, who became very upset. Todd called Rachel, begged her to end her relationship with James for the sake of their children. Then, Rachel promised she would break up with her lover, James. Despite this promise, Rachel and James continued to meet, but more discreetly. In July 2011, the Winkler family welcomed their third child, a boy, Alex. Even though the child is not James's child, but he loved Rachel deeply and dreamed of a future with her, willing to raise her children. However, Todd eventually discovered that Rachel was still seeing James. This was really a big shock to Todd's. Naturally, Rachel's father disapproved of her actions and he supported Todd. Rachel's father, Don, suggested that Todd meet with James to discuss everything calmly, as rational men should, and Todd agreed. Then, Don and Todd went to James' house. When they arrived, James and his daughter, Caitlin, had just finished target practice. Then, they spoke calmly. Todd explains that he is Rachel's legal husband and he loves her very much. They had children together, and he asked James to stay away from her. James agreed but secretly had no intention of ending his relationship with Rachel. Actually, Rachel and James were planning to start a new life together. Rachel had told James that Todd was being tyrannical and tormenting her, though there was no evidence to support this. She even claimed her third pregnancy was a result of rape. This angered James, and he wanted to help her. In October 2011, Rachel visited her university friends for the weekend. She expressed frustrations about Todd not providing her with money, which forced her to borrow for essentials like diapers and food for the children. She revealed that their house was in urgent need of repair, but Todd had no plans to address this. She felt controlled and manipulated by him. Despite she not wanting a third child, but he forced her. She shared her predicament with at least 3 friends. It seems she is in a difficult situation and does not know how to continue raising her children in such an unhappy family situation. One of Rachel's university friends was a lawyer and offered she advice on marriage and divorce. Rachel plans to manage the family finances and wants to reach a fair separation agreement with Todd. She aimed to secure her share and settle alimony matters peacefully, but he was against the idea of divorce. In November 2011, Rachel stopped making mortgage payments on the house because Todd was not giving her money and was hiding his income from her. She began to suspect that he was planning something against her. On November 11th, she called her lawyer friend and expressed that she was ready to begin the divorce process. While Todd was in Amsterdam on a business trip, followed by a vacation, Rachel began filling out the divorce paperwork in February 2012. During this time, she told her lover, James, that her husband had discovered electronic divorce documents on her laptop and deleted them. To prevent this from happening again, she started filling out the forms by hand. Then Todd having learned about the divorce, but he wants to avoid it. Todd spoke to his father-in-law, Don, about Rachel, claiming she was mentally unstable, which was related to their upcoming divorce. Todd said she smoked, drank, and seemed to be losing weight again. However, Don, who saw his daughter Rachel regularly, didn't notice any issues. Rachel explained that her weight loss was due to the stress from the ongoing divorce. The family situation had become extremely tense and seemed headed for a bad outcome. By February 2012, Todd was severely depressed, which his business partner also observed. Todd's business partner suspected that Todd had mental issues because of the divorce, but he insisted that the problem was with his wife. He was considering having her treated in a psychiatric clinic, claiming she was on a drinking binge, and he needed a break to handle the problems that had come up. This conversation occurred on February 10th. On February 26, 2012, divorce proceedings will begin. Rachel was counting on alimony each month to support her children. She planned to move with the children to James' place and was expecting a court meeting. However, that evening, she never arrived at James' house. On the morning of the 27th, a neighbor saw Todd with the children, and everything seemed normal. Around 10:30 a.m., he left his children with a neighbor temporarily because something terrible had occurred at his home. Todd was awaiting the police and did not want his children to witness the situation. The neighbor observed that Todd appeared calm, had no injuries, and appeared to be just irritable. Then, Todd called 911 to report that 37-year-old Rachel had been killed in their home during a domestic dispute. Police arrived at approximately 10:40 a.m. Todd emerged from the house and told the officers his wife was dead inside the house. He was arrested and taken to the police station, where he agreed to speak with investigators without a lawyer. During the interrogation, he is still very calm. He admitted his wife had been having an affair for a long time and had filed for divorce, seeking full custody of their children. He said his wife made him lose his temper, leading to a violent conflict. He attacked her. But then he stopped when he heard their child crying, realizing the children could witness the altercation, so he moved them to another room. Todd returned to argue with his wife, which escalated. He struck her in the face, causing her to respond with a punch. He began to apologize because he realizing his mistake, but his wife approached with a pair of large scissors and cut his hands several times. They started fighting when he tried to take the scissors from his wife. Immediately after, he poked his wife in the eye with his thumb, which helped him knock the scissors out of her hand. He quickly left there to gather his children and take them to safety. Todd told investigators that he was worried about his wife's condition and behavior. He thought she was drunk and could be a threat to him and the children. When he returned home, he found his wife in the bedroom, sitting on the floor. As he approached her, she kicked him in the face. In a rage, he threw her to the floor and began to strangle her with both hands. However, she grabbed the scissors again, but he quickly took them away and struck her face and neck several times in self-defense. She pleaded with him not to kill her, she also promising to save their marriage, but he couldn't control his anger. He admitted that he forcefully stabbed her neck with the scissors. He confessed that, at that moment, he wanted her dead, although he claimed he didn't intend to kill her and that it happened accidentally. After the incident happened, Todd attempted to revive his wife, but she was already dead. In shock, he attempted to clean the crime scene by washing away the blood, but he realized it was futile and called 911. The detectives doubted his account as there were many inconsistencies. It was absurd that he took the kids to the neighbor's house, while Rachel sat calmly waiting for him to return after the brawl. Why didn't she use the opportunity to escape? At 10:30, Todd took the children to a neighbor and then called the police immediately. The medical examiner concluded that Rachel died 6 hours before his 911 call, which contradicted his entire story. During the autopsy, Rachel was found to have multiple injuries, including broken ribs and numerous abrasions. She had cuts and puncture wounds mostly on her face and neck, with the fatal wound being a penetrating cut to the jugular vein. She bled to death in several minutes and had defensive cuts and injuries on her arms and body, indicating she resisted. She was not drunk, having only consumed a little alcohol. Her injuries indicated a brutal attack. Detectives investigating the case learned of the death of Todd's second wife, Catherine. However, they decided to re-examine the case. Catherine's death was initially ruled as a car accident. However, investigators developed new suspicions and decided to review the case. On the day of Catherine's death, in September 1999, her family had gone for a hike in the forest. Todd was stung by a bee and started having severe allergies. So, he urgently needed medical attention. Then, she drove their pickup truck, while he lay in the back seat, heading towards the closest hospital. Unfortunately, she lost control, causing the vehicle to tumble down a mountain. She died in the crash, but he survived. He managed to get out of the car and sought help. Tourists in the national forest heard the crash and came to help him. Todd claimed that the adrenaline released during the accident cleared up all traces of the allergy, which seemed suspicious from the start. When the police arrived at the accident scene, the entire area was engulfed in flames. Rescuers couldn't immediately descend due to the steep slope, they had to use special equipment and ropes. It was puzzling how Todd managed to climb to the mountain summit without Haya. Despite the hot weather, he was wearing winter clothing, which he blamed on chills and fever from an insect bite. Although he claimed to have been in the car with Catherine, he had no injuries, not even a scratch. This was hard to believe, given the severity of the accident. He explained that he was thrown from the pickup truck and his winter clothes protected him. He couldn't remember the location of the insect bite due to fear, and doctors found no evidence of a bite. He believed Catherine was driving too fast, which caused her to lose control. Catherine's autopsy revealed that smoke inhalation and thermal burns caused her death. Her body was completely burned, making it difficult to determine the extent of her injuries. Additionally, a medical examination found no signs of foul play. After an investigation, the death of Todd's second wife, Catherine, was ruled an accident. Todd received over $1 million from her life insurance policy. Following her death, he cut all ties with her friends and relatives, who suspected him of staging her death for financial gain. They thought his story was too implausible, and their suspicions strengthened when they learned about Rachel's death, they believing Catherine had been murdered. In October 2012, Todd Winkler was on trial for murdering Rachel. His story changed with each interrogation, similar to his inconsistencies after Catherine's death. It is believed that he planned Rachel's murder very carefully. At that time, Rachel's father, Don Hatfield, was granted full custody of her child. He saw this as a chance to make up for past mistakes and to rebuild the family he had once destroyed. Don believed that Todd killed Rachel not because of her affair, nor because of their impending divorce, but because she knew his secrets and had threatened to expose them, so he silenced her permanently. According to relatives, Todd had been violent towards Rachel in the past. For instance, her brother witnessed Todd attack her on she by the defendant in a San Diego bar in 2006. She also told her relatives that if anything bad happened to her, it would be because of her husband. She felt he was dangerous. Rachel's eldest daughter shared a noteworthy family incident. One day, Rachel discovered a box containing the ashes of Catherine in a closet. She remarked that she hoped she would never become ashes, and he responded by saying that she should just never make him angry. This exchange left the daughters and Rachel feeling uneasy. During the trial, it was revealed that Todd had previously attempted to harm Rachel. While they were scuba diving on vacation in Florida, he supposedly left her alone, causing Rachel to struggle to reach the boat and almost drown. Later, he reportedly tried to push her off a motorcycle. However, these accounts were unverified and based on stories Rachel told her friends, which she often exaggerated. It was confirmed that Todd had mental disorders, diagnosed with dissociative and conversion disorder, which can cause a break from reality. Despite this, psychiatrists considered him mentally fit. Then, he emphasized his mental health issues to try to lessen his sentence. One day in court, he even feigned psychosis, but this tactic failed. The prosecution argued that Todd committed a premeditated murder. According to the prosecutor, he took scissors, entered the bedroom while his wife was asleep, and killed her. He then had 6 hours to stage a fight, inflict defensive wounds on himself, bandage those wounds, eliminate unnecessary evidence, feed the children, and take them to a neighbor. Only after doing all this did he call 911. Blood stains found on the children's food plates showed that he had prepared breakfast for them after killing their mother. Later, Todd admitted that he did not call emergency services immediately. The timeline he provided did not match the facts. He claimed he took the children to a neighbor before killing his wife and calling for help, but his wife had already been dead for several hours. Additionally, he would not have had enough time to bandage his hands so quickly and precisely. On the other hand, the defense lawyer argued that the murder was an act of self-defense. Rachel was the one who attacked her husband first. She first grabbed the scissors and attacked him. A struggle ensued, and he realized it was a matter of life or death, choosing to save himself. The jury deliberated for 13 days on the case details and testimonies before reaching a guilty verdict. They convicted 47-year-old Todd Winkler of first-degree murder. In December 2014, he was sentenced to 26 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in June 2031, when he will be 64 years old. Todd has filed many appeals, but all of which have been rejected. However, he has managed to secure better conditions for himself in prison. He is serving his sentence at San Quentin State Prison in California. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Martin Durham. Martin Durham was born in 1969 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was an ordinary child and lived in good conditions, all around his natural beauty. In addition, he loved fishing and hiking, capturing photos along the way. He usually took a tent and a hiking backpack to enjoy a few days in the fresh air, he often accompanied by an older cousin. At 17, Martin met his first love, Glenna Johnson, who was a year older. They live in the same area and attended the same school. Their romance was brief, leading to a quick breakup, but they got back together and broke up many times. They shared many interests and could not stay apart for long. Despite their similarities, but they ultimately decided to end the relationship and go their separate ways. For a long time, they neither saw nor communicated with each other. During this period, Martin met another woman, Christine Keller, and he quickly fell in love with her. The two of them get along very well, and then they soon moved in together. After a short time of dating, he realized that she would be an ideal life partner, and they should build a stronger relationship. In the following years, Christine and Martin married and moved into a house given to them by their parents, located in a quiet residential area of the city. Over the next few years, they had 2 sons and a daughter. Christine focused on managing the home and caring for the children, while Martin worked to support the family. In addition to his main job repairing cars, he also worked at a restaurant in the city of Vlaam. Despite this, the early years of their marriage were challenging, especially because their children were born close in age. So, they had many difficulties in taking care of their young children. They slept little and were often exhausted, leading to frequent arguments. However, they were determined to overcome these difficulties. Martin was a devoted father and made every effort to support his family. Many people saw him as a role model. In March 1995, Martin's family faced a tragedy when a truck ran a red light and collided with his car. The truck dragged his car along the road, crushing both Martin and the driver. Martin suffered severe injuries, including broken ribs, a broken jaw, broken legs, and a traumatic brain injury that severely damaged a large part of his brain. Doctors tried their best to save him, but he was in a coma for months. Then, he underwent multiple surgeries and slowly began to recover. However, Martin's difficulties were not over. It took a long time for him to return to his normal life. He had to relearn basic movements, like sitting up and holding his head, before progressing to more complex ones. The accident left his face disfigured, and he lost some brain functions. Despite the difficulties, he tried to overcome them and return to a normal life with his family. He spent a long time moving around in a wheelchair before transitioning to crutches. Although he gradually overcame the physical effects of the accident, he remained psychologically affected. Martin could no longer work as an auto mechanic to support his family, and he encountered many physical limitations that turned his life upside down. The hardest thing for him was not being able to maintain the active lifestyle he had before. He loved camping, fishing, and traveling, but now he was bedridden and just hang around the house. Every movement caused him severe pain, which only the strongest painkillers could help manage. According to doctors, these effects would persist throughout his life. This challenging time affected not only Martin, who survived the accident, but also his family. His wife, Christine, previously managed only the children and household chores, but now she had to handle the family's finances. She was compelled to enroll the children in daycare and find a job to support them, in addition to caring for her sick husband. Fortunately, her close relatives pitched in to help. With their support, Christine was able to manage all the difficulties. However, Martin also became aggressive and hostile towards his wife. In addition, he also lost his memory. He cannot remember much about his past, including family events, and sometimes forgot his children's names. Longtime friends and acquaintances became strangers to him. He was isolated because he did not communicate well with people due to severe memory loss, difficulty concentrating, and confusion. This makes him cold and looked down upon. Martin often retreated into his own thoughts, which he kept to himself. Meanwhile, he was recovering from injuries and regularly attended physiotherapy, sometimes staying in the hospital for treatment. He switched doctors several times, but fortunately, his physical condition gradually improved. However, he was still tormented by the psychological aftermath of his trauma. At the same time, Martin constantly controls the family's spending and criticized his wife's financial management. This made their relationship more and more strained. This was a very difficult time for the young family. Martin went through a difficult process of dealing with trauma and psychological problems, but was unable to overcome them. Some issues made him angry, and he often lost his temper with his wife without justification. Christine did her best to accept the changes in her husband's behavior, but eventually, she felt she couldn't take it anymore. Years after the accident, Christine filed for divorce. Later, she admitted that she didn't want to do it, but she couldn't stand Martin any longer. The divorce was a major blow to Martin. He felt resentment and disappointment for a long time. Some time passed, he was able to regain his spirits. He received a large insurance payout for the accident, which he used to buy real estate and purchase another house. In addition, Martin was also paid a monthly sum by his insurance company as compensation for the accident during his recovery. Thanks to this, he was able to continue his life and take care of himself without financial hardship. After that, Martin moved to his new house with the parrot that Christine loved so much. She had left the bird with he to keep him company and prevent loneliness. The bird, a 15-year-old African gray parrot named Bat, was quite old. This new house is located in Sand Lake, not far from his previous house. He had big plans to recover as soon as possible, so he could return to normal life for the sake of his children. Martin quickly settled into his new place. He kept in regular contact with his children, and even his relationship with his ex-wife Christine improved. She noticed that he finally had an interest in life and enjoyed spending time in the backyard. He discovered his talent for design on his own, and this was soon recognized by others. Neighbors frequently sought his help for designing private gardens and lawn care. This job has helped him earn more income and gain confidence in dealing with life's difficulties and helping him improve his health. Doctors have observed a steady improvement in his condition and has a positive direction. Although Martin's health and mood have improved significantly. But Christine still hesitated to return to him. She is afraid that old problems may return. She kept her distance, maintained contact, and brought the children to visit. By chance, Martin reconnected with his first love, Glenna Johnson, who had also recently divorced. They rekindled old feelings and began a romantic relationship. Glenna eventually moved in with Martin. Glenna's children remained with her ex-husband, but she still visits them regularly. Martin's children also visited from time to time. Glenna and Martin enjoy activities such as fishing, hunting, and hiking. She assisted with his physical limitations during these times. However, it was challenging, so they often opted for walks in the area or visits to the casino, which they loved in their youth. These casino visits have become a monthly routine for them, where they tested their luck. They became well known in the local community, often invite friends and acquaintances over to play poker, backyard barbecues, and generally forming a harmonious partnership. It seems they have found each other again and are happy together. In the summer of 2005, Glenna and Martin decided to get married. Everything appeared fine, but their closest friends knew there were underlying issues in the seemingly perfect relationship. After the accident, Martin changed, he becoming more short-tempered and demanding. He tried to control Glenna and disliked when she did things without him or left him alone for errands. He tries to manage all their finances, which caused problems. She tried to manage family problems by himself, but he was suspicious that she was not entirely honest, spending excessively on unnecessary items. During this time, he continued to receive disability benefits, and his wife took on guardianship, but she had one weakness. Glenna was a gambler and spent a lot of money on it. She visited the casino much more often than her husband, without him knowing, and she losing a lot of money. Additionally, there were issues between Glenna and his ex-wife, Christine. Apparently, Martin frequently complained about Christine, accusing her of leaving him during a tough time after the accident, but he didn't talk about how he made Christine's life unbearable. Christine tolerated him for 2 years before leaving, but she continued to support him as much as she could. Christine kept in touch with Martin's and brought the children to visit he. However, he spoke negatively about Christine to his new wife, Glenna. Plus, Glenna also expressed that she absolutely does not like the children of Martin and Christine. This made Christine and her children feel uncomfortable, to the point where they didn't want to visit Martin when Glenna was there. They disliked hearing unpleasant things about their mother, Christine, and she supported their decision by not bringing them to their father. Martin became angry with his ex-wife and constantly quarreled with her. This led to tension with the children and Glenna. Overall, the relationships deteriorated, and everyone's behavior only worsened the situation. A clear testament to Glenna's deep love for Martin is the tattoo of his name on the back of her hand, which she got 18 years ago when they were dating. She never removed it, likely because she had strong emotions for him all these years. She has still loved him for the past 15 years and waited for the moment they would be together again. However, within the family, the relationship was far from romantic, with frequent disputes over money. Martin suspected Glenna was overspending and debt piled up. She often took money from him without his knowledge. Over time, she took complete control of the family's finances, further straining their relationship. Glenna began using the check from the insurance company that Martin received every month as an allowance. In addition, she also illegally traded in some strong drugs. At the time of the accident, Martin did not take these medications regularly, resulting in a large amount of medication being left unused. Glenna sold these medications secretly. However, his involvement in this activity remains unclear. Some believe he was complicit in the sale, help him earn extra income while he is recovering from a traffic accident and is struggling financially. But there are also those who oppose this theory, who believe that Glenna sold the remaining amount of medicine without telling him. Even though Glenna and Martin's relationship was having problems, they persisted in a toxic relationship for over 11 years. By 2015, they still acted friendly and were always seen together, but they no longer concealed their failing marriage. Occasionally, the discontent between them led to increasingly frequent scandals. One of Glenna's friends later claimed to have witnessed their breakup, during which Glenna threatened to kill Martin. Despite this, they mostly maintained the appearance of an ideal couple, walking hand in hand as they did at the start of their relationship in their youth. By May 2015, the issue of divorce had become serious. One morning that May, Christine, Martin's ex-wife, discovered that Martin was selling his house. She found an advertisement on an auction site and was very surprised. She immediately called Martin to ask why he suddenly wanted to sell a house he loved so much, where he devoted his love to creating his garden. However, he was unaware of this sale, so he asked his current wife, Glenna, about it. Glenna claimed it was a mistake and said she would resolve it, but the fact is she didn't solve it. Previously, their car had been repossessed due to debts, and Glenna had similarly assured Martin it was a mistake and she would fix it, but nothing changed. The auction for the house was scheduled for 3 weeks later, by the end of the month. Perhaps due to the debt accumulated during their marriage, and Glenna wanted to sell the house to pay off the debt, but she did not want to tell Martin about this. On May 13, 2015, one of Martin's neighbors visited him early in the morning to discuss some routine matters. The neighbor was surprised when no one responded to his knock, as Martin usually kept his door open at that time. Concerned, the neighbor entered the house and called out to Martin and Glenna, but no one replied. Venturing further inside, he discovered the reason for the silence. In their bedroom, he found Martin lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and next to it is Glenna, who was bleeding heavily from the head. Terrified that the perpetrator might still be around, the neighbor fled from the scene and immediately called 911. When the ambulance arrived, they realized that Martin was lifeless. Martin was lying on his side, wearing only his underwear, his body already cold, and the doctors confirmed that the 46-year-old had died several hours earlier. However, Glenna was still alive and even conscious. She tried to say something. She managed to utter a fragmented sentence that was not understood. Glenna was found lying next to Martin, fully clothed. However, she could not provide any useful information about the incident. She was rushed to the hospital for medical treatment. A bullet had grazed her skull without damaging the brain, so her injuries were not severe. She recovered quickly after surgery at the clinic. Detectives were able to question her soon after, but she was still undergoing treatment, and they had other cases to handle. The investigators tried to piece together the sequence of incident by examining the crime scene thoroughly. It did not appear to be a robbery, because valuables or personal items in the house are not lost. Even the money, left in a visible spot, was untouched. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Glenna and Martin might have known the attacker and let him in. During this time, police discovered that Martin was taking strong painkillers and Glenna involved in selling them. There was then an assumption that it was that trade that may have triggered the attack. The entire scheme of selling medicines was uncovered, and detectives believe there may have been a conflict with the buyer during the transfer process. However, by that time, forensic experts had already examined and analyzed the crime scene, including the bullets and weapons found in the house. The pistol was later tested and confirmed to be the murder weapon. In fact, this pistol has belonged to Martin for many years, but both of them were shot with it. First, the attacker must enter the house, know exactly where the weapon is and retrieve it. Then he finds the magazine, loads the gun and then starts shooting. This plan seemed too complicated and therefore unlikely. Moreover, during a more thorough search of the bathroom, Martin's painkillers was found and had not been stolen, which ruled out the possibility of selling them and ruled out the motive for the crime being an attack by the buyer. The weapon used to kill Martin was found under the sofa in the living room. There is a lot of blood there, which did not match the location where the body was found. Apparently an attack also took place in the living room, a shooting, and then the shooting continued in the bedroom. Martin might have been shot in the living room, and then the body moved, but why was this done? It seemed this was done intentionally, perhaps to stage the crime and mislead the investigation. This assumption was confirmed when a spent cartridge case was found in the living room, indicating that the shooting occurred there. As the investigation progressed, more questions surfaced. Blood samples from different rooms were analyzed, revealing unexpected results. The analysis showed that all shots fired at Martin happened in the bedroom. His blood was not present in the living room, and there were no signs of his body being moved. The blood found in the living room belonged solely to Glenna, who was discovered in the bedroom. The bullet casing found in the living room corresponded to the shot that hit her head, supporting this theory. But how did she manage to reach the bedroom after this injury? Medical experts informed the police that this scenario was possible because Glenna's injury was less severe than initially thought. She could have reached the bedroom by herself, especially since she was conscious when found. Nonetheless, the situation appeared unusual. From then on, the police began to suspect that Glenna fired at her husband and then injured herself to divert suspicion. However, these theories still needed solid evidence. At this time, the police were unable to interview Glenna, as she was still in the hospital undergoing treatment and recovery. They took her mobile phone for investigation. Through this, detectives discovered that their family was experiencing a severe financial crisis. Just the day before Martin's death, she searched online for how to use the Uger 6 pistol, the same gun involved in Martin's death and her own head wound. Police found 2 farewell letters, in which Glenna apologized to her children for what she was about to do. She also said goodbye to everyone, indicating her plan to end her life. The Supreme Court identified Glenna's as the perpetrator of the crime. Based on all the collected evidence, the investigation was reopened, but something compelled her to shoot her husband first. Martin was killed in the bedroom, and Glenna shot herself in the head in the living room. However, unlike Martin, she did not die instantly and managed to reach the marital bedroom. This can be clarified by talking to her, so the police waited until they could interview her. They continued gathering evidence in the meantime. Martin's family was already convinced that they were not attacked by a stranger. The shooter was his wife, Glenna. Christine Keller, the ex-wife of Martin, was shocked by the events. Although she never thought highly of Glenna, especially because of Glenna's aggressive behavior, but she did not expect this to happen. Then, Christine took her old parrot home to the children. Meanwhile, detectives were finally able to speak with Glenna, who was feeling well. Doctors confirmed that she understood what was happening around her and ready to talk to the detectives. Despite the doctor's positive assessment. But she told the investigators that, in her view, she never wrote farewell letters and did not plan to end her life, let alone kill her husband. Police officers were concerned because Glenna completely denied being involved in the attack on her husband, yet she also claimed she couldn't remember what happened on that tragic day. This inconsistency seemed suspicious and hinted that she might be a suspect, but at that time, they had no solid evidence against her. Glenna was released from the hospital several months later. Meanwhile, the investigation had not uncovered any new evidence. Police were concerned that Glenna's denials and the trauma she had suffered might convince a jury that she was innocent. One day, Christine was awakened by the parrot's voice and went to see it. She was amazed by what it was saying. She decided to use her phone to record the monologue. The parrot kept repeating, "It says, beg Glenna, don't shoot him." This caused Christine's great shock and fear. For a while afterwards, she was even haunted by nightmares. She immediately informed the police and later showed them the video recording. Although the use of a parrot as a witness in court was unprecedented, from that moment on, all of the detectives' suspicions about Glenna's involvement in the case were confirmed. New details of the case have attracted widespread public and media attention. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. The incident was again in the news at the end of June 2016 when police arrested Glenna. They had been collecting evidence to piece together a full case that would clearly show the jury who the killer was and help the Martin family get justice. It was initially thought that the footage of the parrot accusing Glenna would not be used, as it might seem too provocative, and it was uncertain how the jury would react to it. The prosecutor argued that Glenna was in severe financial trouble and could not admit her gambling failures to her spouse. For a long time before the murder, she neglected to pay bills because all her money went to cover debts from her gambling addiction. Eventually, she decided to end her life, writing 2 letters, one to her husband and one to the children. This suggested that Glenna did not initially plan to harm her husband, but something went awry. The final straw was the failed sale of the family home, which was put up for auction without her husband's knowledge. When Martin found out about this from Christine, he likely confronted Glenna. A fierce argument may have ensued, leading her to kill him in a fit of rage before deciding to end her life. Glenna and her lawyer claimed that she had no memory of the shooting or the letter and insisted that she loved her husband too much, so she can't hurt him. They presented a list of medications she was taking to improve cognitive function as evidence of her mental condition. She also denied searching online for how to use a gun, stating that she only used her phone for games and calls. The trial lasted 10 days. The prosecution believed it had a strong case to persuade the jury. However, the jury seemed uncertain, due to the largely circumstantial evidence. Then, a video of the parrot's words was introduced as a crucial piece of evidence. Experts say the parrots form a close relationship with their owner, Martin, and they learn to imitate Martin's voice. Most experts agree that those words left a strong and deep impression on the parrot's memory, so it repeated them over and over again. In the end, this evidence was effective. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found 49 years old, Glenna guilty. In this case, the parrot played an important role as a witness, contributing to finding justice. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Emma Jangestig. Arboga, a small town in Sweden about 160 kilometers west of Stockholm, experienced a crime in 2008 that remains one of the most shocking in the country. On March 17, 2008, a 20-year-old mother of two, Emma Jangestig, was spending the evening with her children. Her eldest, Max, was 3 years old, and her youngest, Saga, was 1.5. Emma was preparing dinner while waiting for her fiancé, Torg Hellberg, who was still at work and expected to return in a few hours. Emma had been divorced for a year when she met Torg. They quickly developed a relationship and moved in together. The couple bought a house. This move took place just 2 months before the tragedy. Although Torg was not the biological father of Emma's children, he cared for them as if they were his own. It seemed that Emma had found the perfect partner to build a complete family and raise her children. Nicholas, the biological father of Max and Saga, maintained contact with the kids. He had a reserved relationship with his ex-wife, Emma, but spoke with the children almost every day. Around 6 p.m., Emma and the children sat down for dinner. Torg couldn't join them this time because he was working late, but he said he would be home soon. While waiting, Emma decided to use the time to message her family and friends. She used a messaging app to chat with her sister, and their conversation continued smoothly until her sister received the last message at 19:07. Suddenly, their dialogue stopped abruptly in the middle of a sentence. Emma didn't read more messages or respond, which seemed odd. Her sister found this strange, so she contacted Torg and expressed her concern about Emma's unusual behavior and lack of response. As it turned out, Torg was free earlier than expected and was already walking home. He assured Emma's sister that he would check on the situation. Torg arrived at the house at 19:17. Everything seemed normal from the outside. But he noticed the front door was open, which was unusual since it was usually locked. Sensing something was wrong, Torg cautiously entered the house and was met with a shocking sight. The corridor was in complete disarray, items were scattered on the floor, and some pieces of furniture were broken. Initially, he couldn't understand what had happened and thought it might be a children's game that had gotten out of hand. However, he soon realized that the extent of the chaos was too severe for children to have caused it, and Emma would not have allowed it. He called out to all the household members by name several times, but there was no response. Suddenly, at the end of the hallway, Torg noticed a suspicious figure on the floor. As he approached, he was horrified. He saw a small body lying in an unusual position with many cuts on its face and head. Emma lay next to it, her body covered in blood. Realizing he needed to act quickly, Torg called the police at 7:20 p.m. The police received the call from Torg, a distressed man who was desperately calling for help. He explained that someone had attacked his family while he was away. In the background, a woman's moans could be heard. The police quickly dispatched police and ambulance services to the location. Doctors arrived within minutes. By then, Torg had discovered that all 3 family members had suffered severe head injuries, so severe that they were unrecognizable. To their surprise, doctors discovered that all of the victims were still alive and breathing. Everyone was immediately taken to the hospital for emergency care. Max and Saga were in critical condition, while Emma's injuries were slightly less severe. Her was placed in intensive care and put into a medically induced coma. Doctors predicted from the start that even if the children and mother survived, the brain injuries they suffered would likely have long-term effects on their lives. Doctors battled to save the victims. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined the scene of the horrific attack, which looked like a scene from a horror movie. The area was cordoned off for a thorough examination due to the severe chaos inside the house. Unfortunately, the medical team left many traces while providing aid and transporting the victims, which led to displaced objects and lost evidence. The attack clearly happened within a 13-minute window between 1907, when Emma's sister received her last message, and Tord's emergency call at 1920. Initially, Tord, the head of the family, was suspected. However, he had a solid alibi as surveillance cameras had captured him on his way home, thus eliminating him from the suspect list. With the time intervals clarified, it became clear that he was telling the truth. This indicated that the attacker had only a 10-minute window between 1907 and 1917, when Torg entered the house and found the wounded family members. Although Torg was no longer a suspect, the police decided to speak with him again at the station. They assumed he might have seen or heard something important for the investigation. However, he insisted that he did not see any strangers or cars. The only thing that seemed suspicious to him was the unlocked door of the house. Police then suspected Emma's ex-husband Nicholas as a potential suspect. Torg explained that Nicholas had constant conflicts with Emma over communication about the children, division of assets and alimony. These issues escalated at times, and she even went to the police because she feared for her safety. However, this was long before the tragedy. Eventually, they reached an agreement and everything was resolved. The police are working hard at the crime scene to gather more information. The perpetrator could be someone close to Emma. Looking at the level of attacks on the victims, it seems that there was a personal motive. Whoever this person was, they harbored a deep hatred for the victims, lost control during the killing process, and caused many injuries. At the time, Emma's ex-husband Nicholas was the prime suspect. Due to previous conflicts with Emma, he even threatened her, prompting her to contact the police. He was later arrested and questioned. Nicholas was shocked by the incident but calmly answered police questions. He had an alibi for the time of the attack, as he was in another city. Although the alibi has not been verified, his behavior suggests that he is not the killer. The police's only hope is 3-year-old Saga, who is still fighting for her life in hospital. If she survives, she could be the police's only witness, providing vital information about who the killer is. The victim's family fear the attacker may return to harm Saga again. To protect her, 24-hour security has been deployed to the hospital. She is in critical condition and doctors believe that even if she survives, she may be permanently disabled and might not remember the attack. No other witnesses to the attack could be found. The neighbors neither saw nor heard anything, so the police started reviewing the surveillance cameras in the area. They hoped to track the attacker and determine his origin. It was also crucial to find the murder weapon, which might have traces of the criminal. Therefore, patrol officers carefully examined the area and even used search dogs, but unfortunately, this yielded no results. Forensic experts found that the children had been attacked with a heavy object, such as a hammer or similar tool. The children had been hit with such force that their skulls had been fractured. Each child had been hit multiple times, indicating the intensity of the attacker's rage. This behavior was an important clue. However, it is not possible to identify anyone capable of doing so. The young family had no connections to the criminal world and no enemies. They were known to be good people. The police quickly confirmed their suspicions of a personal motive, as nothing was stolen from the crime scene. Valuables and money were still present, indicating it wasn't a robbery. The forensic examination of the house concluded the day after the murder. By then, Nicholas was removed from the list of suspects because his alibi was verified. And he was released. Emma is still in a coma and the investigation is making no progress. The case attracted considerable media attention. The area had a low crime rate, and the choice of victims and the level of cruelty were shocking. Police contacted the people through the media, which aroused the interest of those living near Emma's house. A passerby reported seeing a man dressed in black with a hood standing hesitantly in the doorway of the house at around 7 p.m. About 5 to 10 minutes later, the same witness, returning from the shop, saw a suspiciously frail man dressed in black run out of the house, get into a car and drive away immediately. He did not get a good look at the person and could not describe the car, but he thought the driver might be a woman disguised as a man. Several other witnesses later gave similar descriptions of a man in the area. It was clear that the man dressed in black was the suspect before the attack. A man then went to the police and reported his ex-girlfriend, expressing concern about her recent inappropriate behavior. She was identified as Christina Schurrer, 31, born in Hanover, Germany. When she was 11, her father left the family and they had limited contact after that. Christina then moved to New York and lived with relatives in Manhattan. After returning to Germany, Christina settled in Göttingen, where for the next 6 years she studied history. She then went to Greece and participated in RASP. While in Athens, she worked at a hotel and as a historian. Later, she moved to Crete and worked in another hotel. In August 2006, Torg, a 20-year-old trader, vacationed on Crete and stayed at Christina's hotel. On his first day there, he met Christina, and they began a romance. They spent 5 days together on his vacation and continued to correspond after he left. Christina later visited him in Sweden, where they spent several days together. After her visit, she suggested going skiing, but he was not interested. Torg admitted that during this time, he noticed that Christina seemed very different than when she was on vacation, and he felt suspicious about their relationship. In January, he told Christina that their relationship was over, but she couldn't accept it calmly and tried everything to fix it. She kept messaging him, urging him to reconsider and get back together. In March 2007, she visited Sweden for 2 weeks and convinced Torg to have dinner with her. He agreed, but during the meeting, he made it clear that they could only be friends. Christina accepted this and left, but after some time, she returned to Sweden again, insisting on a new meeting, considering that this should be the last dinner together at which they would clear things up. During this meeting, she suggested giving their relationship another chance, but Torg firmly refused, as he believed the matter was settled. Christina informed the Torg that, since they would no longer be in a relationship, she wanted to visit him to collect some items she forgot during a previous visit. Torg agreed to her request. After a brief visit, Christina left. However, the next day, she called again asking for help because she got lost near a castle. The Torg went to find her, and when he did, she admitted that she had taken a large dose of drugs the previous night, intending to end her life due to their breakup. Feeling compassionate, Torg allowed her to stay the night. He contacted her family in Germany to express concern over Christina's situation, informing them about her mental health issues and suggesting they admit her to a psychiatric hospital. Torg was confident that she needed help and hoped treatment would resolve her obsessive behavior. Additionally, he felt she would be far enough away not to disturb him anymore. Her family arranged for her to stay in a psychiatric clinic for 3 weeks. Unfortunately, even this did not stop her. In the summer of 2007, she moved to Stockholm with the intention of staying long-term. Christina rented a house and began looking for work. It was later discovered that in January 2008, she went to Germany but returned on February 20th. After her return, she wrote to Torg, saying that she had given birth to his son. Christina also revealed that she had given the child up for adoption due to her mental health problems. This caused confusion for Torg, as he did not know about her pregnancy. Christina mentioned that she had just gone on a business trip to Germany and that their child might have a genetic blood disease. She said that if the doctor's answer was confirmed, the adoptive parents would contact Torg to discuss the matter. Torg was confused by this. At the time, he was in a serious relationship with Emma and they lived together with her children. In January 2008, they moved into a new house. Emma knew about Christina's problems and the story of her son. Emma was skeptical and asked in question, which hospital was the child born in? She wanted to verify this information to avoid any problems, but Christina could not answer. It seemed that she was lying. After some time, Tord received a call from a stranger claiming to be the adoptive father of Christina's son. He confirmed what Christina had said and confirmed that Tord was the biological father of the child. The entire situation seemed unbelievable. It appeared that someone Christina knew had contacted Tord at her request, trying to manipulate the situation. At this point, Tord and Emma both believed the story of the child to be a fabrication. Christina could not provide any evidence of her son's existence. Police began investigating the possibility that Christina had been involved in the murder of Emma and her two children. She had been near Emma's home on the day of the murder before quickly leaving for Germany. To solve these problems, cooperation between the Swedish and German police was needed. On March 20th, a warrant was issued for Christina's arrest. The media quickly reported that Christina had been found in Hanover. Upon hearing the news, her mother and brother contacted the police, asking why Christina was a suspect. The police explained their suspicions of her involvement in a violent attack, which shocked her mother. Christina then called the police herself, claiming it was a misunderstanding and denying any involvement. However, she was arrested after speaking with the police. Christina requested an attorney, and her attorney found an error in the arrest warrant, which led to her release. However, Christina was rearrested 24 hours later. Throughout her interrogation, Christina maintained her innocence. When police searched her rented apartment, they confiscated her cell phone, laptop, and the clothing she was believed to have been wearing on the day of the murder. Christina claimed she was wearing a beige jacket, but witnesses said they saw her wearing a black jacket. The black jacket found during the search was clean and bloodless, suggesting it may have been a different item of clothing. The key evidence was found in search queries on Christina's laptop, which had many photos of Emma and her children and a blueprint of their home. This showed that Christina was planning the crime. Just before the attack, she looked up ways to hide evidence of a crime. She also repeatedly checked Tord's social media pages, demonstrating her intense obsession with him, along with diary entries detailing her victims, including their addresses and habits. On March 27th, Emma emerged from her coma. She was recognizable, much to the relief of her family. Police prepared for a crucial interview when Emma was able to communicate clearly, taking care not to mention her children to protect her mental state and ensure accurate responses. On April 1st, just 3 days after waking from her coma, Emma had her first meeting with the police. Despite her efforts to remember, she did not understand the police's questions or why she was in the hospital. Doctors hoped that her memory would improve over time. Emma asked more and more about her children. After her first interview, a doctor briefed her about the attack but did not go into detail. However, by the next morning, Emma had forgotten the conversation, a situation that lasted for weeks. Because of her fragile condition, officials chose to provide only vague answers about her children and prevented her from accessing newspapers or TV. This restriction frustrated her further, as she couldn't understand the situation. She continued to believe her children were alive, despite her initial memory lapses. Finally, after a conversation with a doctor, she realized that she would never see her children again, but she still could not remember what had happened. She believed that she had been in a serious accident. At this time, forensic experts did not find any of Christina's DNA or fingerprints in Emma's house. It is possible that Christina's attempt to stage the murder was successful. Additionally, they were unable to find a murder weapon. In March, Christina's roommate reported to the police that a hammer had gone missing from her toolbox. The hammer matched the description of the murder weapon, indirectly linking Christina to the crime. However, without strong evidence to charge, the investigation continued. Police focused on shoe prints found at the scene of the children's murders. Several other footprints, belonging to the paramedics, the three victims, and Torg, were not involved and were discarded. However, police did identify prints from sneakers not worn by family members or police. They identified the brand, style, and size that Christina had worn. A photo on her personal page showed her wearing the same pair of sneakers, in the same size, but this evidence remained circumstantial. Video surveillance recordings from the railway station provided significant evidence, showing that Christina, wearing her jacket, visited the city at least 3 times in the week before the attack. Her last visit was on the day of the murder, March 17th. Although the images were unclear, her identity was confirmed through mobile phone geolocation. When questioned, Christina could not clearly explain her presence in the city. She later stated that she was there for work. Police were able to determine the motive for the attack when they found notes on Christina's computer that revealed her intense jealousy of Emma, as Christina struggled to accept that Torg had found happiness with someone else. A psychological examination determined that Christina was sane. The police continued to make every effort to help the Emma, who miraculously survived, regain her memory. They even accompanied her to the crime scene, but this did not assist. Then, a few days later, there was an unexpected breakthrough. Emma suddenly recalled that on the evening of March 17th, someone had knocked on the door. The Emma opened it to find a girl in dark clothes and a hood standing there. The stranger introduced herself as Christina and immediately struck Emma on the head with a heavy object. It is frightening to think about what happened next in the house and what the defenseless children went through. On July 29, 2008, Christina Scherer appeared in court in Sweden, charged with double murder and attempted murder. Her defense team remained hopeful, considering the evidence against her circumstantial and easily dismissed. However, Christina's strange behavior complicated matters. She waved and smiled inappropriately at those present in court, behavior that supported the prosecutor's portrayal of her as cruel. Christina said her visit to the city was for work. The prosecution, on the other hand, argued that she had come to the city with the intention of killing. They claimed that she had been there twice before, on March 12th and 14th, to check out her targets. Furthermore, they portrayed Christina as a pathological liar obsessed with her ex-partner. There was no evidence that she had ever been pregnant or had children. No witnesses saw her pregnant, and there were no maternity records showing that she had given birth or adopted a child. This undermined her claim of having children, casting doubt on her credibility. The key witness for the prosecution was Emma, who identified Christina on the first day of the hearing. She recalled that about 10 minutes before returning from work, she opened the door and encountered the person who had killed her children. Emma was so shocked to see the killer that she fainted in the courtroom. This incident was significant because it confirmed that Emma had not been exposed to any information about the suspect or the crime prior to that moment, which strengthened the prosecution's case. The defense focused on the fact that all the evidence against Christina was circumstantial. They pointed out that the murder weapon didn't have her fingerprints, and there was no DNA evidence linking her to the crime. The prosecutors highlighted blurry surveillance footage and a sneaker print, suggesting that doctors may have inadvertently destroyed important evidence. Additionally, one witness recalled seeing Christina near the crime scene, which supported her presence close to Emma's house, where another witness identified the attacker. Christina could not explain her internet searches in relation to the evidence cover-up, nor why she had photos of Emma and the children, along with a diagram of Emma's house. On August 26, the jury found Christina Scherer guilty of double murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In addition, the court ordered her to pay Emma 100,000 crowns, or about $10,000. Christina's attorney immediately appealed the decision, but the appeal was denied. It is expected that if Christina is ever released from prison, she will be deported to Germany and permanently barred from returning to Sweden. In 2012, she was transferred to a women's prison in Fay, Germany, at her request. She continues to seek to overturn the court's decision and insists on her innocence, attempting to obtain a new trial. Emma is still dealing with the physical and mental effects of her injuries. Throughout this time, Torg has been a strong support, and they eventually married. They later had 2 children together. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Assunta Botera. Rosario Porto and her husband, Alfonso Botera, were wealthy individuals. Rosario's father served as an influential French consul, and her mother was an art teacher. Rosario followed in his father's footsteps. She became a successful lawyer. In 1997, she was appointed French consul. She inherited this post from her father. Alfonso was a well-known journalist. He and Rosario married in 1996 and they moved to a large apartment in an upscale area of Santiago de Compostela, Spain. Rosario had lupus erythematosus, which led doctors to advise against pregnancy. They decided to adopt a child abandoned by his parents and create a loving home for him. Adoption was challenging in Spain, so when they were in their early 30s, they chose to go to China for adoption. After navigating numerous bureaucratic hurdles, they arrived at an orphanage. Rosario immediately noticed a 9-month-old girl, and within 2 weeks, they resolved all issues to officially adopt her. When returning to Spain, the child's documents named her Assunta Fon Yan. This was notable since Assunta was among the first Chinese children adopted in the area. Initially, it seemed fortunate for her to join a respected and wealthy family, but unfortunately, this joy did not last long. Assunta was a highly capable girl. She excelled academically, studied multiple languages, practiced ballet, and attended music school. It seems that Rosario and Alfonso want to give her every opportunity to develop. On July 4, 2013, Rosario and her 12-year-old daughter, Assunta, went to the beach to cool off on a hot day. Assunta told a terrifying story about a man wearing a black mask and gloves who tried to strangle her the night before. The longer the girl talked, the more she lost control, and finally, her mother cried. She knew about it, she was there when it happened, but for some reason she did not contact the police. On the night of September 21, 2013, at 10:30 p.m., Rosario and Alfonso were at the police station for another reason. They reported their daughter, Assunta, was missing for several hours. Then, Rosario recounted Assunta's story of the attempted attack from 2.5 months prior. This left them fearful that the attacker had returned and something terrible might have happened to their daughter. They were terrified she had been kidnapped. Alfonso was convinced she was no longer alive. They urgently pleaded with the police to take immediate action. In the early hours of September 22, 2 men were driving through a forest on their way back from a bar. Suddenly, the driver stopped, saying he noticed something unusual in the forest. He didn't understand what was going on, so he turned his headlights toward the forest and mentioned to his friend that he felt like someone was watching them. Despite this, he wasn't scared, likely due to the alcohol he had consumed, so he got out of the car and walked a few steps into the forest. In the light of the car's headlights, he saw something on the ground that looked like a doll. As he approached, he realized it was a girl. She was tied up, and her clothes were dirty. He checked for a pulse and found that the girl was dead. Then, they quickly contacted the police. The police identified the body as Assunta, who had died just a week before her 13th birthday. While examining the area near her body, they discovered her mobile phone, which contained some disturbing photographs. There are several photos of she wrapped tightly, lying with her eyes wide open. Some forensic experts suggested her dilated pupils indicated possible drug use. Even more distressing were photos of the girl in revealing clothing, with bright makeup, fishnet stockings, and posing provocatively on a couch. Her eyes remained wide open, and her pupils were dilated. These photos later appeared on the internet, were widely circulated and making people angry about how a child was treated like that. Asunta's last day was described by her parents as ordinary. However, then little girl suddenly went missing and was found dead a few hours after they reported her disappearance. On that day, the girl went to visit her father, Alfonso, at his work, and then hurried back home, so she not wanting to miss The Simpsons at about 7 p.m. After she returned home, Rosario, her mother, came back from work and saw her daughter in her room, where she had her books spread out on the floor for homework. Rosario didn't notice anything unusual and left to go to their country house, which was about half an hour away, to pick up bathing suits and other items for a planned beach outing the next day. Rosario returned around 9:30 p.m., and by then, Asunta was no longer in the apartment. Rosario became worried because little girl hadn't called or mentioned any plans to go out, which was unusual for her. Thinking maybe she had gone to see friends, Rosario started calling the girl's friends and Alfonso, but nobody had seen she. Rosario was the last person to see Asunta alive, making her one of the first individuals the detectives focused on, and she was questioned at the station. During her discussion with the police, Rosario recalled the incidents of July 4th, the night of the first attack. When they returned from the store that evening, Asunta closed the front door but left the key in the lock. Her mother didn't notice, and they went to bed. Around 3 a.m., Rosario was awakened by cries for help. Rosario rushed to her daughter's room and saw a large man pinning little girl to the floor, seemingly trying to strangle her. She attacked the intruder, but he was very strong and easily threw her against the wall. Fortunately, no one was harmed, and the attacker fled. Rosario described him as a strong, middle-aged man dressed in black, wearing a mask and gloves, so it is not possible to give a more detailed description. Asunta told her friend about what happened and even sent several photos showing red marks on her neck. Asunta's father, Alfonso, mentioned that little girl had struggled with depression for a long time and was taking medication prescribed by doctors. This was confirmed because Asunta talked to friends and shared her experiences. Recently, she had been speaking more positively about her situation, saying she felt much better. However, after Asunta was first attacked, Rosario did not investigate to find out what was happening to her daughter. She cited Asunta's fragile emotional state and said she feared contacting police would upset Asunta. This explanation was not very convincing. Over the years, Asunta had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital because she often expressed end-her-life thoughts. Besides, she is very tired because of the overload of knowledge at school and extra classes. The nanny also said that Rosario had recently become very frustrated with Asunta, as little girl was no longer meeting Rosario's expectations, and her academic performance had declined. She had become somewhat of a burden, prompting Rosario to consider sending her to study in Poland. However, Rosario did not mention this to the detectives, so they decided to investigate Rosario's immediately. They were particularly interested in the country house Rosario visited on the day Asunta disappeared. As it turned out, when detectives got there, they found Asunta's body lying just 4 kilometers away. Rosario appeared surprised to see them. She was furious. She quickly headed to the second floor, clearly trying to hide something. When a detective checked a nearby trash can, he found a piece of orange rope inside, identical to the one used to tie Asunta's hands and feet. There was also a black mask and gloves. All these items were collected for examination, but unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA were found. The investigative committee conducted several autopsies. They did not measure the body temperature immediately, fearing it might compromise the evidence, so the exact time of death couldn't be determined. However, it was estimated that Assunta was killed around 8 p.m. The cause of death was suffocation. Her mouth and nose were covered with a soft object, likely a pillow, which prevented her from breathing, leading to unconsciousness and eventually death. In addition, an autopsy determined that Assunta had taken at least 27 lorazepam pills on the day of her death, 9 times the normal amount for an adult. Hair tests revealed this was not the first occurrence. Little girl had overdoses 3 months before her death, starting when the attacker first breaks into the home. It's important to note that overdoses of this drug can cause amnesia and loss of muscle control. The drug was used to treat anxiety disorders and insomnia. The police discovered that Rosario used it to combat depression, but it was not prescribed for Assunta. No one could explain why Assunta took the drug. According to Rosario, the criminals gave Assunta medicine so she wouldn't remember the incident. Detectives conducted a review of CCTV footage in the area to track Assunta's movements that day. Around 2 p.m., she visited her father, Alfonso. At 5:21 p.m., she returned home, and at 5:28 p.m., Rosario returned home. At 6:20 p.m., a gas station camera recorded a green Mercedes belonging to Rosario. She admitted the car was moving towards a house in the country. It was clear that besides the driver, there was a girl in the car, identified as Assunta. They were heading in the direction where Assunta's body was later found. The new testimony completely contradicted Rosario's earlier statements, making she the primary suspect in the murder. Therefore, she was questioned again. Rosario's face showed fear and shame because she had let her adopted daughter go missing while she was responsible for taking care of the girl. Then, she offered a different version of events. According to her, they went out to get swimsuits together, but when they arrived at the country house, Assunta refused to enter with her. Assunta chose to stay in the car while Rosario took everything she needed and did some small work. However, this took longer than expected, and Assunta wanted to return home to do chores and rest. Rosario agreed and drove her daughter back. But she dropped her daughter off about a 20-minute walk from their apartment to avoid navigating the narrow streets. However, the police reviewed CCTV footage from the outskirts of Santiago but found no evidence of Rosario taking her daughter back home. They only saw footage of Rosario leaving her country house alone around 9 p.m. Her story is full of controversial and contradictory details. She appeared to look at the detectives with arrogance, displaying coldness and showing no regret over the loss of her child. She persistently insisted that the large man in black was involved in the incident. When the police interviewed the Botera family's neighbors, one mentioned hearing screams at night in July, when Assunta was first attacked. He also observed something unusual. Even though the attacker entered an area where dogs lived, the dogs were silent, indicating that the attacker was very familiar with them. All in all, everything seemed suspicious, making them even more suspicious that Rosario and Alfonso were involved in the murder of their adopted daughter. The police considered different theories about the first home invasion. Some thought it was fabricated by Rosario, while others suspected it was the parents' first attempt at murder. Few believed an outsider was involved. On September 24th, Rosario and Alfonso held a funeral, during which they behaved oddly, even taking a selfie in front of the coffin. Due to inconsistencies in her testimony, Rosario was arrested after the funeral. By then, detectives had discovered what might have been the motive behind the crime. Witnesses came forward with information about incident from 9 months prior to the tragedy, and this may have been the beginning of the bloody end. In January 2013, Rosario started a relationship with a realtor named Manuel Garcia, whom she hired to sell real estate. Manuel was married and made it clear he would not leave his family. he considers the relationship with Rosario to be nothing more than an affair. Rosario was fine with this, and their secret relationship continued. During this time, her relationship with her husband, Alfonso, quickly deteriorated. She finds Alfonso boring and considers him a failure who overestimates himself. She described him as insensitive, while her lover, Manuel, was the complete opposite. After Alfonso finds messages from Rosario's lover on his wife's phone, they divorced in February 2013. Rosario and her daughter Assunta continued living in the apartment. She maintained her business and visited a country house. Custody of the daughter, Assunta, was shared, and both parents have the right to see the little girl. After Assunta's parents divorced, she lived in both her father's and her mother's houses. Many observed that she was always close to her mother, while her relationship with her father was not as warm. However, her father made efforts to improve their relationship. He also repeatedly told his ex-wife Rosario that they would be forever tied together through their adopted daughter. Is it possible that because Rosario wants to completely cut off contact with her ex-husband, so she will cause the innocent child to leave forever? It is known that earlier in the summer, Rosario had to end her relationship with her lover, Manuel. Alfonso took advantage of the opportunity, he convincing Rosario to end her relationship with Manuel in exchange for his help with their daughter while she was in the hospital. And Rosario agreed to this request. However, it was revealed that on September 21st, Rosario broke her promise, she spending most of the day with Manuel and only returning home in the evening. This is very suspicious, because soon after, Assunta was killed. During the investigation, numerous assumptions were made, including one significant point emphasized by the defense. They argued that male DNA was found on the clothes Assunta's, indicating a man's involvement. While it was considered possible that the mother was not involved in the crime, this scenario was deemed unlikely. Police have stepped up their investigation, collecting documents for analysis, focusing on identifying male DNA on Assunta's body. Several options were considered during the investigation. At first, Alfonso was suspected, but then all attention turned to Manuel. However, he had an alibi and had no motive to harm Assunta, so he was quickly dismissed as a suspect. Surprisingly, the DNA was identified as belonging to a stranger named Ramra, a Colombian citizen who lived in Madrid, about a 6-hour drive from Santiago, where the incident occurred. This may seem strange. When questioned, Ramra fervently denied any connection to the case, claiming he had never been to Santiago and had no involvement in the murder. Indeed, Ramra had an alibi. He was having dinner at a restaurant in Madrid with his girlfriend and was captured on CCTV footage there. Why had Assunta been taking prescription drugs in the months leading up to the incident without any prescription? Further examinations revealed that only a portion of the DNA traces found belonged to Ramra. The lab staff suggested that the match could be due to poor quality samples or contamination. There were even suggestions that someone might have intentionally tampered with the sample's DNA to mislead the investigation. At this stage, many questions remained unanswered, and detectives considered even the most unlikely scenarios. Rosario and Alfonso seemed indifferent to what happened to their adopted daughter. Rosario was the last person to see Assunta alive, and the press speculated that she could have acted alone. Despite her fragile appearance, but investigators doubted she could physically manage Assunta's body. Using cell phone towers, police tried to determine the whereabouts of Rosario and Alfonso at the time of the incident. On that day, their phones were turned off. This makes the police even more suspicious of them. However, Rosario explained it was a coincidence, and their phones just run out of battery at the same time. They don't have any bad intentions. After talking to a local pharmacist, who was also a friend of Rosario's, they discovered that Rosario first contacted the pharmacist on July 5th. The day after an intruder broke into the house and attacked Assunta. After that, this drug lorazepam was purchased in large quantities by Rosario. Considering all the circumstances, the detectives decided to arrest Alfonso Botera. Some of Asunta's teachers had noticed unusual behavior in her. One day, Asunta attended her violin lesson with her father, Alfonso, and she seemed unable to control herself. Alfonso explained that his daughter was just under the influence of allergy medication. The teachers observed that she was usually very reserved and did not share her problems. The drowsiness incident occurred repeatedly, but the parents always had excuses, typically citing her health condition. The teacher was suspicious and distrustful of the girl's parents. When the police interviewed Asunta's teacher, she described Asunta's symptoms and behavior, which matched many side effects of the medication. 2 days before the tragedy, the last suspicious incident happened. On that day, Rosario informed the teacher that her daughter couldn't attend class due to a severe reaction to prescribed medications. After hearing this, the detectives were convinced that the adoptive parents knew about the medications and attempted to poison Asunta. Although Rosario and Alfonso were divorced, but Alfonso was determined to reconcile with she. In June 2013, 3 months before the tragedy, Rosario experienced a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized. During this time, Alfonso moved back in, feeling optimistic as his wish to reunite with his family seemed to be coming true. During this period, Rosario ended her relationship with her lover. Alfonso visited her in the hospital and cared for her after her discharge. It seemed like family matters were improving, but later it was revealed that she had lied, she continuing her affair and meeting her lover on the day of the murder. Given the new information, the investigation believes that Alfonso sought revenge. Perhaps he wanted to cause Rosario more pain than he had to endure from her betrayal. This could explain why the orange rope ended up in the trash at the country house. It was simply tossed there by Alfonso. However, why was Rosario so alarmed when the police arrived, and why did she immediately check the trash? She likely knew about these items and was an accomplice. The police have discovered a new clue. Whenever Alfonso was at home with Rosario and Asunta, the little girl be drugged with lorazepam. However, Alfonso refused to comment on this, claiming he was not guilty. After the arrest, Rosario's behavior was unstable, alternating between hysteria and depression. Meanwhile, Alfonso remained quiet and calm, he constantly trying to reassure Rosario's by saying they just needed to love and support each other, and that everything would soon be over. Despite his soothing words, the police noticed his cold demeanor. Eventually, the police found the storage media Alfonso used. It turned out that the hard drive on his laptop had been completely replaced. Experts discovered that over 500,000 photos and videos had been stored on it, likely compromising material. The police also found that he had an unhealthy interest in Asian girls on his social media page. Evidence showed he had dozens of interactions and correspondence with Asian girls, and according to investigators, the photos suggested these girls were minors. Additionally, he often showed interest in adult Asian women with very youthful appearances. Later, a woman who owned an escort agency approached the police. She confessed that Alfonso was a regular at her establishment, always requesting only Asian women and insisting they dress as schoolgirls. Even his wife was aware of this preference. Photos of the murdered Asunta in revealing clothes made the situation even more serious. The prosecutor focused on how the seemingly calm and quiet Alfonso had cruelly treated his adopted daughter Asunta. The charges suggested that Rosario and Alfonso were criminals covering for each other, with both involved Asunta's death. What could have motivated the crime? Rosario and Alfonso refused to cooperate with the investigation and wouldn't communicate without their lawyers. Later, on their attorney's advice, they completely stopped commenting on the tragedy. Forensic psychiatrists were crucial to the investigation. They analyzed Rosario and Alfonso's behavior and identified them as narcissists with personality disorders. It appeared they adopted Assunta to present a loving family image, pressured by Rosario's parents. Sadly, Assunta became a mere pawn for them, and once she was no longer needed, they first exploited her and then decided to eliminate her. A 15-year-old acquaintance of Assunta testified for the prosecution. Although Alfonso claimed he stayed home all day until the evening on the day of the murder, this was proven false. The girl saw him around 6 p.m. near Rosario's house, a fact later confirmed by camera footage. Alfonso was captured on camera at 9 p.m. after Assunta had disappeared. These conflicting details added to the evidence against Rosario and Alfonso. The trial was highly controversial, with even the judge's conduct coming under scrutiny. Many suspected he sought fame, suspicions that were later validated when he authored a book about the case after the trial concluded. Relatives and neighbors of the Botera family watched for years as the foster parents tried to create the best environment for Assunta. They are financially well off, ambitious and have a tough personality, but those close to them notice their devotion to Assunta. Many people still believe that the trial's outcome was a miscarriage of justice. In court, Rosario and Alfonso maintained their innocence. Alfonso remained calm and reasonable, while Rosario often cried, became hysterical. She puzzled in her testimony in justifying his behavior with the effects of the drug. Rosario's cousin testified at the trial and shared some new information. In 2011 and 2012, Rosario's parents both passed away suddenly at home. Their deaths were suspected to be under unusual circumstances. The cousin believed that Rosario was involved in the murders of her parents and daughter to inherit the entire property. However, the defense attorney rejected these claims. Rosario's mother passed away at the age of 77 and her father passed away at the age of 88. Both passed away peacefully from old age in their sleep in their beds. Although doctors found nothing unusual, their bodies, like Assunta's, were cremated, making it impossible to verify any unnatural causes of death. Meanwhile, the prosecutor contended that Rosario and Alfonso were true sociopaths. Alfonso was apparently a pedophile who drugged his daughter and chose to record these incidents. Assunta posed a threat of exposing them, leading to the decision to eliminate her. This theory was supported by numerous photographs and evidence indicating that Alfonso had an unhealthy obsession with young Asian girls. It is likely that Rosario was complicit in these activities or was at least aware of them but chose to protect Alfonso's wrongdoings. Alternatively, Rosario might have seen the girl as a burden and decided to eliminate little girl with the help of Alfonso. On October 30, 2015, the court found Rosario and Alfonso guilty and sentenced each to 18 years in prison. After beginning their sentences, they both appealed, but their appeals were rejected. On November 18, 2020, Rosario was discovered dead in her prison cell with a belt around her neck. This was her third try to end her life. Alfonso remains imprisoned and maintains his innocence.